Welcome to the entire plot of Kingdom of Ash from Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass series. This is going to be a part 2 compilation of parts 7 through 11 of my series. If you would prefer to watch this in smaller parts, they're usually between 30 minutes to an hour. You can find all of those parts linked down below. However, if you do want to watch it in one giant large chunk, I have chunked it all here for you. So this is the second part. If you want to go over the first half of Kingdom of Ash, that is a whole nother video. Alright, so let's start in chapter 68. This is in Dorian's POV. He has officially arrived to Morath, but he is in the form of a crow. First thing off the bat he notices all the damage that Kaltain did, and he's like, snaps for Kaltain. Kaltain, you did a beautiful job. So he's flying around in this crow form trying to find the best way to enter into Morath in a sneaky way. And if you're like, wait, what about the word keys? He has them. He didn't leave them with Manon. He brought them with him. However, he was a little nervous about going into Morath with the word keys in case he got caught, so he hid them in the woods. Is that extremely risky? Absolutely it is. However, riskier than going into Morath with them? Probably not, because then Erewhon would quite literally have all three, because we're here for the third and final word key, so he has them hidden somewhere in the woods. So he shifts into a mouse form, finds his way in through a servant's door into like a laundry room or something, like where Lead used to work, right? And then he, because of his mouse form, has to spend basically an entire day getting up the stairs. He has to climb each individual step. And he goes into like the wing that Kaltain told him would be his best luck in finding the third word key. This is where things get interesting, because Dorian actually finds in Erewhon's tower like his meeting room, and this is where we know he's talked to Manon in the past, where he's talked to Uncle Vernon. It's basically a conference room, and Dorian in this moment has a really dumb idea. Literally the very thing that Kaltain said, hey, this is going to be your biggest temptation while you're here, but whatever you do, don't do it. Yeah, he's already considering that, and he's only been here for like not even a full day yet. He's like, what if I transformed into my human form, right? And then I have my sword, right? Damaris, the truth-telling sword. And what if I just killed Erewhon right here and right now? Then no one would need to forge the key. Literally what Kaltain said, whatever you do, don't dwell on this thought. It's a really bad idea. So he's thinking about doing that when none other than Maeve, Queen of Doranel, walks into this conference room. Not to be anticlimactic or anything, but let's actually jump back, because there's something I want to note here. Dorian is actually seeing Erewhon for the first time in this conference room in his non-Parrington form, because Dorian has only ever known Erewhon to be like Parrington, right? In Parrington's body. So this is where we're like, oh, like Erewhon actually has his own form. And I switched to like the form that some fan art is that he looks like when he's in like his Valg King form, because we learned that they don't actually have like a form when they're Valg. It's not like a human form like we would expect it to be, or a Fae form or something like that. I kind of imagine them more as like these kind of like shadowy, freaky spirit type things, but I'll leave that up to your imagination. Chapter 69, we're going to jump to Adian's POV, because they have made it to Orinth. Thanks to Rolf and his men, seriously, they absolutely saved our butts, because we were not going to survive. And he knows their hours are numbered at this point, and honestly how defeated the soldiers are. Their morales are a little bit low right now, and it's totally understandable. And obviously, because Ansel was expecting half of her men to come, and now they are all dead, she is also very defeated, and she has been very much like one of our go cheerleaders this entire time. So that is unfortunate. However, there is one bright side to all of this, and that is that we are going to have the uphill advantage now that we are in Orinth, though that might be our only advantage. So later that day, Adian is meeting with the allies, as well as some of the lords of Terrasen, and Daro is ticked off that Adian's even there. He's like, I've demoted you. Remember that it was like this big thing, right? Very dramatic. He's like, I demoted you. You shouldn't even be here. And the funny thing is that the person who was supposed to replace Adian doesn't really want to be a part of the politics thing. He doesn't really want to be the general, so he has actually sent Adian there in his place as a representative. So Adian's like, actually, I'm following the new general's orders, and you assigned him to be the new general. So it's kind of funny, like Daro's gonna try to demote Adian and make his life harder, but all of the people love Adian who have served Adian, because he is an amazing warrior and he loves and cares for all the soldiers in the Bane. So naturally, when Killian took his place, he was like, dude, like, you deserve this position. You didn't lose it because you're not good at your job. You lost it because Daro is being selfish. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing, because I know that that's how we're going to succeed and win this war, is if you are actually leading us. So go as my representative. So sucks to suck, Daro, but you're going to have to get over it. Daro thanks Rolf for his help and coming to save all their butts. And Rolf is like, oh, I didn't do it for you. I actually did it for Aelin. And I love how every single one of the allies very much picks up on Darrow's crap every single time he starts to talk. And they're like, I didn't do it for you. Oh, it's like that one scene in Hamilton, I'm not here for you, right? And when Angelica comes and Hamilton's like, oh, you came for me. And she's like, I'm not here for you. I'm here for my sister. Okay, that's what all the allies are doing, okay? They're like, I'm not here for you. I'm here for Aelin, okay? Darrow, of course, is very offended like this, and instead of lashing out at Ralph because he is a horrible, horrible man, he just decides he's going to turn towards Lysandra and take out his anger on her. And he's all like, you shouldn't even be here. I'm going to kick you out. But Murtaugh speaks up because he's an amazing old sweet man and we love him. And Murtaugh's like, oh, actually, someone is waiting for you and very excited to see you. Evangeline is here. And so Lysandra is like, part of me wants to stick it to Darrow and, you know, stay here anyways, but I really miss Evangeline. So she ends up leaving to go find Evangeline. After Lysandra leaves, Adian drops like some serious bars. And he's like, look, I know you disagree with what Lysandra has done, lying about being Aelin and pretending to be Aelin and all that, but I will remind you that she has been fighting in the front lines in battle, every single battle, which is something that you can't even find in yourself to do. Okay? Which is crazy for him to call out Darrow for that. Darrow's trying to call out the shots, but Darrow isn't even willing to be on the battlefield. Okay? He wants to make all the calls from behind the walls. Very interesting. Maybe you should think about that before you start putting shame on Lysandra. Darrow, of course, pulls the whole like, man, I'm gonna end up quoting Hamilton like 15 times now. He's like, fighting is easy, living is harder. Like that kind of concept of like, I wish I was fighting, but you don't know what it's like to be too old to fight and have to watch from the distance. Like, okay, whatever. Tensions get a little high, but Galen cuts off Adian and Darrow's like, all right, let's get back to planning the battle. So they do, and then after the meeting, Adian decides to follow Lysandra's scent, and he finds her in the empty throne room, looking at where the throne of antlers used to be. Because the antler throne, as well as actually the antler crown, so like antlers are very much like the thing here in Terrasen, right? Because of the white stag. So those were both destroyed by the King of Adarlan after the invasion of Terrasen. And so Lysandra's just like thinking about it, like what it would have looked like. The crazy thing is that she turns to Adian and she says, deep down, I thought we might actually make it somehow, even with Morath and the Lock and all of it. Basically, in other words, even Lysandra has lost all hope. Chapter 70, this is going to be in Dorian's POV as he is processing, why would Maeve, Queen of Doranel, be here? And why would she possibly ally with Erewhon? At this point, he is like the only one who does not know that she is a Valg queen. Erewhon even asks Maeve as much, to which her response is, do you not know me then? Millennia apart, and you have forgotten even your own sister-in-law? So honestly, I don't know who's more shocked at this moment that Maeve is the queen of the Valg. Erewhon or Dorian. They're both totally thrown in this moment because she has been hiding, right? That's what she was telling Aelin. She was hiding from the Valg kings. Okay, so Erewhon now knows who Maeve is. Dorian now knows who Maeve is. I think everyone now knows who Maeve is. So they're both shocked. Dorian is very much processing, still in the form of a mouse, when Erewhon's like, why are you revealing yourself to me now after all of this time? And she just says that she wants to help him defeat Aelin, to get back at Aelin, because Aelin wrote a strongly worded letter to some high up important people in Doranel and got her overthrown and thrown out of her kingdom. Okay, so Aelin's strongly worded letter that she wrote to Rowan's uncle, basically saying like, hey, so Maeve is actually a Valg queen, and here's what a Valg is and why they're so horrible, and you guys need to banish her. She's not even actually royalty. She just kind of like found her way into all of your mind and convinced you that she was actually the queen and that she was actually Fae, but she's none of these things. Apparently that worked, and Asar believed her, and Asar got a bunch of, if not all of the Fae of Doranel to revolt against Maeve. So Maeve has officially been dethroned. She is no longer queen of Doranel. She is just the Valg queen. But all Dorian can hear from this is that Aelin escaped Maeve. So he does have this moment here where he's like, this is terrifying. We're not just dealing with Erewhon. Now we're dealing with Maeve, who is way more powerful and scary than I originally thought. But yay, at least Aelin got away and the rescue mission worked. So there's at least a positive there. So Erewhon's like, okay, then why would I want to ally with you? Like, what do you have? You don't have Doranel anymore. You don't have all these Fey warriors. So what am I getting out of this allyship, if you will? Her power. She has a special power to make portals and world walk. Then on top of that, she has the loyalty of the Karankui. In other words, like the Stygian spiders that are significantly more brutal, okay? So she has access to a Karankui army and the ability to create and walk through portals. Your Valg princesses need hosts. You have had difficulty in securing ones powerful enough to hold them. The Cognate princess managed to survive the one you planted in her and is mistress of her own body once more. Why bother with human hosts when you might create ones far more powerful and willing? Erewhon is definitely interested, okay, because imagine the power of a Valg princess, okay, in the body of a Stygian spider. That is terrifying. And so he's thinking about this, but instead of responding with like affirmative or negative, he's like, so what should I tell Orcus? Orcus is his older brother, okay? I'll remind you, that is Maeve's husband, okay? She married the oldest of the Valg kings. Because if you think about it, she's been hiding from Orcus, and he's aware that she's been running away from Orcus all this time. And when he conquers the world, he doesn't plan to just conquer the world for himself. He's going to conquer the world and then summon his two other brothers to join them. So he's like, so are you all of a sudden no longer running from Orcus? That's a very good trick question. But she says, you know what? Like, we can discuss this over the next couple of days. And he's like, okay, fine. You can stay in one of my guest rooms. We'll talk another day about this, because obviously there's a lot to discuss here before anyone accepts any sort of ally. So Maeve is offered a guest room, and as she's going there, Dorian follows her in his mouse form, but the second the door closes to her room, she turns towards his mouse form and says, "You are not a very skilled spy, King of Aderlin." Chapter 71. Dorian shifts back into his human form. Apparently, not only did Maeve learn Dorian's scent through all that time that she was like weaving through Aylin's brain, freaky, weird, but on top of that, she had a spy reporting back to her, a Stygian spider named Cyrene, okay? So that spider that was like following Manon, and then Dorian ended up stealing her shape-shifting power and killing her. Well, apparently Cyrene was reporting back to Maeve somehow. So Maeve was also aware of the fact that Dorian had most likely come into some shape-shifting magic. She then asks him where the other two keys are, because I guess Cyrene shared that detail with her as well, and Dorian even in this moment can feel like something trying to slither into his brain. So she's like using her weird Valg shadow magic to try to like get into his brain and get the information about where he hid the other two word keys. He, however, shoots back at her with his magic, and she says, you know what, it was worth a try, but obviously I'm not going to get into your brain, so what if we just work together instead? Interesting. Basically, she offers that she actually lied to Erewhon, and she's here to find the third and final key as well, because she does not want Orcus to come back, or the other brother as well. She actually wants to find the three word keys because she wants to banish them as well. And the crazy thing is that Dorian has his hand on the sword Damaris, right? And it's a truth-telling sword, and the sword indicates to him that she's telling the truth. So he's like, oh shoot, like she's serious, and I'm definitely not going to be able to do this on my own. She's very powerful. Maybe we should work together. And so he's thinking about all the advantages and how he's like, yeah, I could get the third word key way easier, way faster if I team up with Maeve. So he makes her an offer. If you think about it, she's desperate. She's lost everything, and all she wants is to be queen. So he offers Maeve his hand in marriage if not only does she help him find the third word key, but she also uses the Stygian spiders to help them fight against Erewhon in their favor. So he's asking her, he's like, be our ally, help me find the third word key, help us defeat Erewhon, and I will make you queen in Aderlin. Because that's all she wants. She wants to be protected. She wants the Valg Kings to be banished. She wants power. She wants to be worshipped as a queen. He's like, what could possibly go wrong? Obviously, like, he doesn't love her. He doesn't want to be married to her, but like, he wants to win this war. He wants to get his kingdom back. He wants to defeat Erewhon. And he's like, everyone here is willing to make sacrifices. I can make this sacrifice. And, you know, Manon wasn't willing to marry me, not in the way that he wanted her to. And he's like, so things aren't going to work out with Manon. So like, what if I just do this with Maeve instead. And her response is, "You came to Morath for a key and will leave with a bride." In other words, Maeve is accepting the terms of this deal, so we are going to begin our search for the third and final word key. We're going to jump to a little bit later the same day. We're still in Dorian's POV after he has seen Uncle Vernon, okay? So he studies Uncle Vernon's form so that he can shift into Uncle Vernon, right? So shortly after one of Vernon's meetings with Erewhon, Dorian re-enters the room in Vernon's form, pretending that like he thought of something else and came back. Erewhon doesn't really seem fazed by this. He seems to believe that this is actually Vernon. So Dorian in Vernon's form is like, "Hey, I actually have a question for you. You could have made yourself the lord of literally any world. So why did you choose this one specifically?" And it basically comes down to, you know what, like we were conquering a bunch of different worlds back to back, hopping from world to world, and this is the only one that really fought back successfully and banished my two brothers. So now this is just about revenge. And for Dorian, what this really does is this confirms that Maeve is the lesser of two evils. He's like, you know what, I can stomach being married to Maeve. Like if it means getting rid of all the Valg Kings, like this to him kind of confirms his decision that he's doing the right thing. Because although her intentions aren't good and her actions are definitely not ethical, she at least wants to preserve this world so that she has something to rule over, whereas they just want to destroy it. Erewhon seems really annoyed and even starting to get a little bit suspicious about these types of questions, but Dorian tries his luck and asks one more. He says, "Did the former king of Aderlin ask such questions?" Basically, Dorian is still wrestling with, did I do the right thing in killing my dad, right? And the reason why he hesitates is because his dad claimed right before Dorian ended his life that he's actually been trying to fight it the whole time. And Dorian didn't believe him in the moment, but he's had some doubts since. Like, what if my dad was actually a good person and he just couldn't fight the Valg influence, kind of like me, right? Erewhon doesn't respond with an answer to this question. He just says that Vernon would be surprised with how unfaithful the King of Aderlin was and how hard he fought Erewhon over the years. And after that, Dorian just leaves the room and he heads up to Maeve's rooms for the night to sleep, but he can't sleep because all he can think about is like, oh my word, what if my dad was being truthful and honest and he was finally free from the Valg influence and I could have finally had a relationship with my dad after freeing him, but instead I chose not to believe him and I ended his life instead. And does that make me the monster that I fear I'm becoming? Chapter 27, this is a really short one. It's just Nesrin's POV as she is scouting the Farian Gap before everyone else arrives there. Like she's just went there a little bit before everyone else and she's confused because there's literally nothing there. No Iron Teeth witches or anything. The Farian Gap is empty. Chapter 73, we're actually going to jump back to Dorian's POV. I told you, it was a really, really short chapter, okay? Like, that's important, and we'll definitely get to what in the world's going on and why the Farian Gap is empty later. Anyways, so we're in Dorian's POV as he is searching Morath every single chance that he gets, in every single form that he can think of that can fly. He's been a bug, he's been a bat, he's been a cat. He's basically just making his rounds, trying to find a way into Erewhon's tower. Because yes, he can get into the conference area, but Erewhon has like private chambers, okay, that he can't get into. He can't find windows, he can't find cracks in the stone, he can't find anything like that. And then on top of that, he's just seeing if he senses the word key, because I mean, he's been infected by a Valg, right? So he has an idea of what a Valg influence feels like. So he's also using a lot of time to explore around Morath to see if anything kind of calls to him and pulls him. He has been searching all stinking day while Maeve is keeping Erewhon distracted. So she has basically convinced him to like, let's at least test to see if one of my Katankui spiders can become a host for a Valg princess. So they've been down in like the place where he's been doing those like Valg experiments over time, right? So that's where they are while Dorian's doing all of this like searching around. So Dorian is flying around in a fly form when he passes a door that he has passed many, many times today. However, he assumed it was just some sort of supply closet, but he realizes this time that there is kind of like this weird smell coming from it. And he can only really describe the smell as like that kind of Valg stench. So he decides he's gonna look into it a little bit more, but even the gaps in the door are really, really small. So he shifts into this tiny gnat and finds a crack in the door that he can kind of like shimmy his way through and make it to the other side. And this room is the room that Erewhon was in when he was in his magically induced coma, okay? So he was put to sleep for years and placed in like this tomb, right, by Elena and Gavin. This is that room. And not only is it that, Erewhon is now using it as a place to store all of the word collars, okay? Remember, Dorian had a word collar around his neck. So Dorian starts having these really traumatic flashbacks. He starts basically having what I can only describe as a panic attack. He just starts to have this full-blown meltdown, and then he starts to feel something sucking him back from under the door with magic. And he freaks out, being like, oh my word, Erewhon just caught me, like what in the world? It ended up being Maeve, so she ends up like sucking his little nap body into her hands. And in this moment, he thinks like, oh my word, is she gonna crush me and kill me and call this a day? But instead she says, what you felt in there, that is why I left their world every day. That was what I felt. And I'll just say here, Dorian starts to kind of slightly maybe sympathize with Maeve a little bit, because he's starting to wonder if Maeve and him aren't so different after all. Crazy! So they go back to Maeve's room. Dorian is, recovering emotionally, mentally, trying to get his bearings again and trying to relax a little bit. And then he has a thought. He asks Maeve if she knows how horrible and horrendous it is to be infested by Valg and being around Valg all the time, and how horrible that is. If she truly loves her Karankui that are so loyal to her, why would she subject them to the kind of torture that comes with being infested by a Valg princess? And Maeve actually in this moment looks very regretful. She's like, I don't feel like I have a choice. Like, I don't want to do this because I do love them. And Dorian doesn't have the sword on him in this moment, but he does believe her because he has now heard her lie multiple times, and he's heard her tell the truth multiple times. And he feels like he has a pretty good idea of like when she's being truthful. He then asks her why she took Aelin, because remember, he's starting to sympathize with her a little bit, and he's like, let's not forget everything she's done. But like, I don't want to make assumptions. So he's starting to ask more questions. Her response is basically that she needed protection from Erewhon and the two other brothers that he was going to summon. And she also drops in a little tidbit here that Erewhon is the most tame and the least freaky Valg of the three brothers, which is not reassuring. But she basically just says like, Valg are afraid of fire. We've talked over this multiple times. Like, fire does, you can burn the Valg out. And she just saw all of Aelin's power, and she saw that as a way to protect herself. And that's also why she got so close to Brandon of the Wildfire as well. She wanted to be near a very powerful fae with fire magic. Okay, so it makes sense, but obviously Aelin wasn't going to be like a loving niece and fight along with her, so she felt like she had no choice but to kind of go the enslavement route. Interesting. I will also point out that it's now coming together why she always had those fae healers with her. Remember the owl? I have been pointing out to you since we met Maeve, okay, that there is an owl in this photo with her. That is a fae healer in their owl form. Also, owls are symbolic of Silba, which is the goddess of healing. Okay, so it all comes back to owls, right? Not owls. Healing magic and fire magic both work against the Valg, right? So she had a layer of protection with her healing fae that were in Doranel, right? But then also she did want to have Aelin as well as like a second layer of protection. Next question that Dorian asks is about her true form, and then she kind of goes into the whole explanation about how they don't have like a fae form or a human form. It's kind of hard to describe, like what I told you earlier. However, she says that the form that she currently has and the form that Erewhon currently has is the most themselves that they could be in like a physical form. Like, they're not both in the form of a different person. Like, they have created forms for themselves that they feel like is their true identity as a physical form. So it's confusing. So like, Maeve is actually Maeve right now. She's not like pretending to be someone else or in the body of someone else or like in the form of someone else, but she's not in her true form either. But like, this is her physical form if she were to have a physical form. Same for Erewhon. After that headache of a conversation, Dorian's like, all right, let's get back to game planning about how we're going to get this third word key. Because he's like, after everything, after all my searching, after looking around, it's very clear to me that I need to get into Erewhon's private chambers. Like, there's no other place it's going to be. So Maeve gets this idea. Okay, that if he can't get in through like a window or a crack in the stone, she's gonna have to seduce her way in. Okay, so Maeve shifts her dress into a spicy little getup, and they make their way over to Erewhon's tower. She then lets the guard who answers the door know that she's there to see Erewhon, and sure enough, Erewhon comes to the door. Chapter 47. I cannot even imagine the second hand, third hand, first hand, maybe even embarrassment that Dorian is experiencing as a mouse in Maeve's pocket, watching her try to seduce Erewhon. It's very awkward. And before it gets crazier, I will say, she did warn Dorian before they went. She said, you're not going to like what you see. I know Erewhon is twisted, and I know how to play into his twisted desires, so I will just warn you, you are not going to like what you see, what I might have to do. Interesting, very not terrifying sounding at all. But I will say, you have been warned, okay? So Maeve is in his doorway, and he's like, you're my brother's wife, so I'm gonna have to say no to this. How am I gonna say no to this? Another Hamilton reference. I don't know what's up with that. That's like, what, the third Hamilton reference now? But Maeve is like, oh, that's fine if you don't want me as your sister-in-law. Like, that totally makes sense. Let me change into a form that you might like even more. And then she shifts into Aylin's form. Okay? Crazy? Do you realize what that's implying? That is wild. Dorian is mortified because Erewhon actually seems to consider it now. Like, he hesitates. Like, he's tempted by this. What? However, he's still not going for it. So then she shifts again into none other than Manon Blackbeak's form, okay? Was she your intended queen when the war was over, the wing leader, or merely a prize breeding mare? Okay, this is crazy because literally in a single sentence, we have just confirmed that is how the grandmother matron, right? The Blackbeak matron, she said that Manon was going to become queen of the witches. And she was like, why would Erewhon let me become queen? It's because he was planning to marry Manon after the war. Manon was all but betrothed, unbeknownst to her, to Erewhon. Dorian is also realizing all of this, and he is doing everything in his power to hold back his anger. Because I'll remind you, like, these are really powerful beings. They can smell emotions. Remember how, like, even, like, we hear about, like, Rowan smelling Aylin's fear, you know, stuff like that. So it's like, he needs to contain himself, but he is struggling. He's struggling because homeboy still likes Manon despite how they left things. Okay, despite the fact that he has offered his hand in marriage to Maeve, he has feelings for Manon, and he is realizing how dark and twisted her situation was. Dorian thinks that Erewhon is about to let her in Manon's form. However, Erewhon just says, you know what, you're still my brother's wife no matter what form you take, and he closes the door on her. Therefore, we did not make it into the tower. But the next day, Maeve and Erewhon have like one of their planning meetings. So Dorian is in Maeve's pocket listening in, and things are understandably awkward and tense after the night before, right? But they discuss a few things about like what this allyship would look like. And Erewhon says his biggest hindrance to considering this allyship is that he feels like she is not bringing enough to the table. She then says, like, obviously, you know, I can open portals and walk between worlds. You know some things about that, but like your power doesn't come nearly close to mine. What if I told you that you have the power to be a world walker like me and make portals to the levels that I can? And what if I offered to teach you? He's considering it, but still not fully committing, right? So then she has another idea. She said, actually, to sweeten the pot, I'm going to open a communications portal. Okay, for you to talk to Orcus and Mantix, the two Valg King brothers. Chapter 75, we're actually going to leave Dorian's story just for a quick little bit to go to Adian's POV. So he is surveying what was once his home in Orinth to make sure everything is ready for battle, but also a little bit out of nostalgia as well. We learn here, actually, one of the things that he's like having a little bit nostalgic flashbacks about was his friendship with Ren when they were growing up. But you're like, wait, they were friends before? Like, they didn't really give off that vibe and air of fire. That's because when they were kids, eventually it became clear to them, and also Ren's father, that it was between Adian and Ren who would be Aylin's sworn sword. So it wasn't promised to Adian from birth, but he was definitely in the running for the role. And once Ren's father learned that Ren had a chance, he basically caused a rift between them, forcing them to compete. And Adian Haven has this moment where he was like, if my dad, Gavriel, was around, like, would he have encouraged me to compete as well? Or, you know, like, what would that have looked like? And then he decides he doesn't want to dwell on what life would have been with Gavriel as his father. But basically, he says that the competition was so bad and the rift was so intense that their friendship became non-existent by the time that Adian was chosen. Yeah, so that's kind of why they weren't friends and why things were kind of tense in the beginning of Verifier, but it seems like we're good now. So, I mean, it's kind of awkward because we both definitely have the hots for Lysandra, so there's a whole new level of competition there. But we'll see how that plays out. The bright side to all of this is that he is actually thankful that, if anything, this war has brought him closer to Ren, and he feels like, you know, it's like when they were kids again. He ends up talking to Ren for a little bit in the whole making plans part of things, talking with Ren about where the archers are going to be because Ren is in charge of all of the archers, and Adian gets an idea. So later that night, in the cover of darkness, Adian takes some of Ilias's silent assassins and Rolf's men, as well as Lysandra, out into the battlefield. The assassins help them sneak into these premeditated targets. Lysandra shifts into this, like, giant badger of sorts, so that she can dig some large pits. And then Rolf's men put something in these pits before Lysandra covers them again. And they repeat this process basically up until the sun rises. And then they make it back to Orinth. What in the world they were up to? Oh, just you wait and see. So let's flash forward to the next day because the Morath army is on the horizon. And Ansel counts 50,000 troops. Okay? 50,000 troops. And then on top of that, 3 witch towers that are now rolling towards Orinth. As this is happening, Adian gives a signal to Murtaugh, who signals Ren, who signals his archers, and they all shoot flaming arrows. And people are a little confused because they're not shooting these flaming arrows at the actual soldiers. Turns out they're landing them on fuse lines that Lysandra dug last night, and Rolf's men was like putting stuff in them, right? So these were lines connected to the mounds that Lysandra also dug closer to where Morath is coming from right now. And under these mounds, they buried explosive devices. So they literally just created like a dynamite bomb that went off right as 2 of the 3 witch towers were crossing the mounds, okay? So they entirely destroy 2 of the 3 witch towers. That is huge for us. It's so huge that the entire Morath Legion just stops. They don't even know what to do. They're like, that was kind of like how we were gonna win this whole thing. We don't know how much time that bought us, but it did lift everyone's spirits, and Morath is definitely stopping for a little bit to kind of recoup and figure out what they're gonna do. However, the joy and excitement of everything pausing stops because Ansel, when she counted 50,000 soldiers, that was just what she could see from the horizon. However, after some more came through, she finished her final head count right as the witch towers exploded, and that is 100,000. Okay, so 100,000 Valg soldiers. That's a lot. Chapter 76, we're back to Dorian's POV, thank goodness, as he asks Maeve a little bit more about this communication portal that she offered to open up to Erewhon. And Maeve says she's not actually going to do it. She's going to use a witch mirror to create an illusion that he is talking to Orcus and Mantix. So it's going to be a diversion for her to get Dorian into the tower. So Dorian still doesn't see how he's actually supposed to get into the tower. Like, the distraction's nice, but how is he going to get in? Maeve, however, has a plan for that. She is going to create a short distance portal for him to get into his private chambers. Dorian is like, wait, that was an option this whole time? Like, why haven't we done that yet? But she tells him, she's like, Erewhon actually has protections for that kind of magic, especially the second Maeve got there. I'm sure he put it up if it wasn't already. But she has been spending the last few days, while Dorian has been looking around, carefully unraveling with her magic those protection spells. And she had to do it very slowly slowly and very sneakily so that Erewhon wouldn't sense that those protection spells had been taken down. So they solidify their plans to get Dorian into the room, and they decide once he gets the third word key, she will portal them to where he's hiding the other 2 word keys. Then they'll take all 3 word keys. They're going to banish the 3 Valid Kings from ever coming back. That is the game plan. So let's flash forward to game time. Maeve has just left her room to go open a communication portal for Erewhon for him to talk to his 2 brothers, and Dorian is waiting in Maeve's room for this portal to open that's going to drop him into Erewhon's private chambers. He decides, just to be safe, he's going to take the form of Erewhon in his shape-shifting form. So if he runs into any servants or guards or anyone else who's in the private chambers, it's not going to raise any alarm bells, and it's just going to seem like Erewhon is in his own tower, or he came back to his room for something, right? So after a few minutes, a portal pops up and Dorian takes a deep breath because he has no idea what he's gonna see when he goes in there. But he takes a deep breath and he steps right into the portal. Chapter 77, Dorian is in Erewhon's private chambers. And first of all, he's relieved it worked. Second of all, he's relieved that Maeve didn't play one on him, because part of him wondered. He was like, what? I'm putting a lot in Maeve's hands right now. So she could have easily screwed him over, but she didn't. So he's in the room, and the first thing he notices is how plain everything is. He kind of expected everything to be ornate and very power hungry-esque, but it's really just a plain room. Nothing grand, nothing out of the ordinary. But he jumps because he hears a noise, and he kind of freaks out, and he looks over to hear that the noise is coming from the bed, and it's this sickly looking girl. She looks like she is dying, basically. And he can't help but notice that she looks like she may as well be Kaltain's twin. I'm not going to read between the lines there for you. I think you are capable of doing that for yourself. That is disgusting and heartbreaking, and I hate it. And it makes me wonder, how much of Kaltain's story did we not get? There's clearly so much more abuse that she went through that we don't even know about. But Dorian, he sees right through this, and he pieces everything together, and he's absolutely disgusted by this, but he realizes, like with Kaltain, this girl probably has the word stone sewn or embedded into her body somewhere. And sure enough, just like Kaltain, there is a giant scar on her wrist. So he knows that the word stone is there in her wrist. So Dorian wants to show pity and comfort this girl, but he is supposed to be Erewhon right now, in Erewhon's form, which makes sense why she's whimpering and she's terrified. So he just demands to see her arm, and sure enough, she pulls it out, and he uses a dagger to cut the word stone out of her arm. However, Dorian, because he is a sweetie pie and he cannot handle, treating this girl like this, he's actually secretly imbuing some of his healing magic towards her hand to make it hurt less, and so that her arm will heal faster. And sure enough, he pulls it out, and Dorian officially has the third word key, which, the other 2 are still in the woods, but that means Dorian is in possession of all 3 word keys. So he turns towards the portal to jump back into Maeve's room so he can start heading towards the woods, grab the 3 word keys, and they can move on with what they were supposed to do. When the girl speaks up, okay? When he took out the stone, I guess, she gained a sense of herself again. And she just turns to Dorian and begs him to take her life. She's like, I don't want to live anymore. Please end this. He can feel from the sword, which he has on him, that she means every word and it's truthful. And he's wondering, would it be mercy? Or would it make me the monster that I am afraid I have already become, right? This is the thing Dorian has been wrestling with this whole time. And he doesn't know what to do, and he has to make a decision because he needs to get back to Maeve's rooms as soon as humanly possible. Every second that he waits, is a second towards Erewhon discovering him. However, Maeve pops into the room from another portal and kills the girl. Consider it a wedding gift, Majesty, to spare you from that decision. Okay, Maeve, was that a mercy or not? And it kind of makes you wonder, did she do that for him, or is she just heartless? But you know what? The answer is very clear very quickly, because she uses Dorian's shock in that moment to launch at his brain. What do you think for? The information she has wanted since she first realized he is there. Where are the other 2 word keys? Why would she need to know that by stealing it if they were supposed to go there together? Come on now. Chapter 78. Maeve demands that he hands over the third word key, as well as tell him where the other two are, while she is like trying to use his brain to like force him to give her the information. However, Dorian doesn't answer, and you're like, wait, how? Like, she's very powerful, she's like in his mind, how is he able to snap out of it? Like, it wasn't easy for Aelin. Well, Maeve didn't have her claws around Dorian's mind. She actually hasn't this entire time, though Maeve thinks that she has had her claws around Dorian's brain this entire time. So turns out Dorian, okay, this is really trippy, so bear with me here. Dorian learned how to shift his mind and create a fake one on the surface so that Maeve thought that she had grasped his mind, but really his real mind, that is Dorian, was hiding behind it. So he allowed her to caress his fake brain and think that she was studying him, when in reality he was then going around the back with his magic while she was distracted on his fake mind that he had created because of shifting to study her magic. Because remember, Dorian can do all forms of magic, he just needs to learn how to do it first. So in this moment, Dorian has mastered the art of Daemati powers, okay? The ability to hijack another person's mind. So he then takes her moment of shock and confusion to hijack her brain. I love this. And then Dorian drops an absolute bar. I was a slave once. You didn't really think I'd allow myself to be so once again, did you? You hurt my friend. It will not be so very difficult to end you for it. So Dorian has been playing Maeve this entire time, and Maeve thought she's been playing Dorian this entire time. We didn't even know either one of them thought they were playing the other person this entire time. She tries to pull the victim card and says, "Is this the king you wish to be, torturing a helpless female?" To which Dorian responds, "You are not helpless, and if I could, I would seal you in an iron box for eternity. The king I wish to be is the opposite of what you are, and there is only one witch who will be my queen." Okay, so, Dorian still plans to marry Manon, is what you should be getting from that, despite everything. Yeah, he's just gonna get the third word key, do what he needs to do, and then he's gonna go back and he is going to get his girl. And then, as if like this already wasn't like the most amazing thing ever, the entirety of Morath begins to shake, almost as if there's like an earthquake happening. And Dorian decides to let us in on another little secret of something he's been up to this entire time in Morath that we didn't know about. When he was flying around as all these creatures, looking for either a crack in the stone or a window or trying to find the third word key, he was shooting little bits of ice into cracks in the foundations of Morath. Ice he is about to let all expand at once, taking down the entirety of Morath with it. However, because Dorian is an ethical king, okay, he made sure that everything in Morath would collapse except for the servants' quarters. So he lets the ice expand, Morath starts to crumble, he removes his claws from Maeve's mind, but before he does like he did with Serene. He steals Maeve's magic and he steals her ability to world walk. And Dorian creates a portal for himself and himself only and takes off to where the other two keys are. So from a distance, Dorian now has all three word keys. He gets to watch Morath fall and crumble to pieces, and then he shifts into a wyvern form and takes off to find Aelin. Chapter 79, we are in Yrene's POV as they have just entered an empty Farian Gap. And the vibes are off to her. She doesn't like it. This place should not be empty. Although I will say, slight caveat, it is not entirely empty. They did find some of those Valg breeders. Do you remember in Heir of Fire, the wyverns were bred by these like guards that also worked as Valg breeder type people? Yeah, so there's a couple of those that got left behind, so like those people are there, but there's no witches, there's no Valg foot soldiers, nothing like that. And Kale and Aelin and the rest of the cadre, they have captured all of these Valg breeders and they are interrogating them to see if they can find some more information. We'll learn more about that in a second, but we are in Yreen's POV. Yreen is putting in some extra time, of course, since they are resting here in the Ferian Gap while the interrogations are going on, and so she is just working to heal some of the soldiers that maybe she couldn't get to before they had to start their journey, and of course she is getting help from Alide. Now, Alide has a lot of questions about her magic, and since this is more like low-key type healing and not the crazy stuff that we've been doing the past couple days, they're just chit-chatting away. It's very casual, and Alide asks a bit more about her healing magic and just takes some time to learn about it. And a little bit of context here, we do learn in this moment that sometime over the past couple days, Alide did open up to Yreen about what went down with her ankle and like what her uncle did to her and the abuse that she went through to like receive the injury that she has. So there's context there. But Yreen in this moment, after Alide's been asking some questions, says like, hey, if you want, I can heal your ankle. There's two different ways they could go about this. One is like a healing salve that's pretty much just gonna work as like a magical painkiller. However, 10 years down the road, Alide's situation will get worse and her injury's gonna get worse because like it's bones rubbing against each other now because I guess the cartilage has gotten so damaged to the point where it's literally just like bones in her ankle rubbing against each other. And Yreen says like I would have to then do like a full magical surgery 10 years down the line. Or once we win this war, I can go ahead and actually do that now. I'll just give you a heads up that you're pretty much going to be on bed rest for like a month. It's going to be extremely painful. I'm going to have to like re-break some of your bones to re-heal them. Like it's very gruesome, not very fun. Definitely not something you want to do during a time of war. So Alide thanks her and says, yeah, absolutely. Let's do the surgery. Like, you know, I don't want to go through that pain. However, like I do want to be able to walk. So yeah, let's do like a salve for now to get me through the war. And then once we win the war, then yeah, I would love for you to heal my ankle. So there is hope for Alide that she is not going to have this bum ankle for the rest of her life. But shortly after this, they get interrupted by Bort. Bort comes bursting into the healing tent and says that Aelin needs Alide because they need her to help them to decide what to do with a prisoner they found. And Alide looks at them like, why do I get a say in what happens to a prisoner that they found? One of the Valg breeders? Like, why would I get a say in that? Why do they need me? And Bort's like, it's not exactly a Valg breeder so much as it is your uncle Vernon. Now this is juicy. Let's jump to Alide's POV as she has been escorted to Aelin and the cadre. Apparently, a couple days earlier, Uncle Vernon had come into the Ferian Gap. And he was left behind with some of the other Valg breeders when they found him. So Aelin's like, here's the thing. He hurt you. You should get to decide his fate. And Alide thinks about it for a moment and she's like, you know what? Let me talk to him first. And she just has one simple question. Why? Like, why are you the way that you are? But then like, why did you do to me what you did? Why are you who you have become, basically? And he starts going on like this rant about his lovely victim mindset. And Alide's like, oh, so this really boils down to your jealousy of my father being born first. Because Uncle Vernon was born second. So his older brother, aka Alide's dad, he got the lordship over Parenth. We also learn here that Uncle Vernon may or may not have been very jealous of his wife as well. And then they had this lovely child together, and then he was praised as being this warrior, right? And so Uncle Vernon just didn't feel like he deserved it just because he was born first, so he wanted to strip that away from him. And Alide's like, oh my word, it's jealousy. Like, this is why you are the way you are. You just can't handle the fact that my father had what you wanted, and instead of seeking out that life for yourself, you had to take it away from him. And it's horrible. It's very twisted. Alide in this moment sees her uncle for what he is, and that is frankly pathetic. And so she's like, okay, I'm done. So she goes to leave, and he's like, wait, don't you want to learn about how I managed all of it and how I did this, and that? Like, he just wants an ego boost right now. He wants to rub it all in her face. And she's like, no, I don't care. You're just pathetic to me. I don't care what happens to you. And she's out of there because she doesn't want to listen to him talk about how he felt like he rose to greatness under Erewhon, because, I mean, obviously he's captured now, like, what's there to be proud of in this moment? As Elide goes to leave, she just turns towards Aelin and she says, interrogate him, do what you gotta do, end his life, I don't care, just whatever you do for the sake of honoring my father, like, make it quick, like, don't draw it out. And Fenris is like, quick but not painless, which I love that that's his first thought. And Elide's like, I don't care how painful it is, just make it quick. Let's jump to Aelin's POV as she sits down for her interrogation with Vernon, and she offers him a plea deal because she can tell that he does not want to die in this moment. So she's like, okay, I will give you your life, so long as you give me the information that I want. And the first thing she asks is about Maeve. What does he know about Maeve? And he confirms her worst nightmares in this moment, and that is Maeve did recently go to Morath and ask for an alliance with Erewhon, and Erewhon did accept. Chapter 80. This is obviously, like I said, Aelin's worst fear. Her head is spinning. She wasn't even sure that they could handle Erewhon or Maeve, let alone Erewhon and Maeve. She has more questions about what this alliance looks like, but Vernon can't answer them. Do you want to know why? Because shortly after Maeve came to Morath, Vernon was sent away to the Varian Gap for asking too many questions. And guys, this is the funniest thing, because even Vernon in this moment is like, I didn't ask questions hardly ever, so I don't know what that was about. It was because of Dorian. We literally just went over in the last part how Dorian had shapeshifted into Vernon's form so that he could ask Erewhon some like really personal questions. Because of Dorian doing that, Vernon got sent away. But out of context, Vernon's very confused. It's very funny, but I'm glad it happened because then Vernon is able to get the justice he deserves in this moment. She then starts asking him about the third word key, to which he doesn't even really know what a word key is. She asks him if there was like a black sliver of stone similar to the one embedded in Kaltain's arm, and he just says if there's another one, he doesn't know about it. But something that he does bring up here is that Kaltain also had powerful fire magic, and you know what she was able to do with the word stone in her arm, and he's like, imagine what it could have done in your arm, which, ew. Also, second of all, that does confirm that Kaltain had fire magic. I mean, we could assume that because she had that shadow fire thing. We knew that she had magic 100%, we just didn't really fully know what it manifested not under the Valg influence, because we only ever saw it under the Valg influence, and we know that Valg influences do tend to corrupt and twist things. So confirmation, because I think some people get confused and they think that Kaltain had shadow magic, because there's a lot of shadow magic in other Sarah J. Maas books, but actually in this moment it is confirmed that she didn't have shadow magic, she had fire magic, and the shadow aspect of her fire magic was from the Valg influence. That might not have been a clarification that you needed, but I think some people definitely do need to hear it, because I've seen some crazy theories on TikTok that I'm like, no, she didn't have shadow magic, she had fire magic. Anyways, besides the point. Aelin then asks him where everyone who was in the Varian Gap is now, and if you were holding out hope that they all decided to listen to Manon and join Manon and fight in Terrasen, no, they were just put into action and sent to Terrasen. So 100,000 Valg foot soldiers, as well as all the witches who were in the Varian Gap, were sent a couple days ago to Terrasen. They're probably days away from reaching Terrasen at this point, according to Aelin's calculations, and if nothing goes wrong, Aelin and everyone here in the Varian Gap right now would take 2 weeks to get to Terrasen. Okay, so chances are, even if they booked it straight there right now and nothing went wrong, the war would be over by the time they got there. She decides that she has learned enough, and so she starts to walk away, and he's like, whoa, you said if I gave you information, you would set me free. And Aelin's like, no, I said if you gave me information, I would not unalive you right here, right now. I said nothing about setting you free. You chained and locked my friend in a tower for 10 years. Let's see how you enjoy the experience. And then they lock him in the room. After the door is locked, Aelin then turns to Elide and she's like, I'm sorry, the one thing you asked me to do was make it quick, but I don't think he deserves that. So I'm actually giving him one of the slowest possible deaths I could. And Elide just goes, okay, that's fine. Chapter 81, this is in Adian's POV, and it is the night before the big battle. And he has a very strong feeling that they are not going to survive tomorrow. So he's, nostalgic, as he kind of has been this whole time. But I feel like the nostalgia does build every single one of these moments where he's like, okay, now there is no hope. And he actually has a heart-to-heart with Ren. In this heart-to-heart, they accept the fact that Aelin and Dorian are not coming, and they would have heard from them by now if they were coming in time. So they're like, you know what, this is kind of the end, but I'm glad to do it by your side. Which is a crazy sentiment, especially coming from Ren, because he goes as far as to say, like, I would have loved to be a part of this court. From even the very beginning of this book, Ren was very skeptical about where he fell with Aelin. So despite the deceit, despite her not showing up, despite everything that's happened up till now, and frankly the failure of everything leading up to this point, he is realizing that, like, he loves what Aelin stands for and what Aelin's court stands for. And basically he's like, even though, like, none of it worked out in the end, I would have joined Aelin's court. Ren. So sad. After his heart-to-heart with Ren, Adian then runs into Lysandra, who is on her way to comfort very obviously frightened Evangeline, when Adian asks if Lysandra's comfortable with him speaking to Evangeline. She's a little skeptical, but she's like, okay. And Adian just has a sit down with her, and he basically tells her about, like, when I was your age, like, oh my goodness, I was terrified, I was worried sick, and I was supposed to be this warrior, like, I was being trained to be this big bad warrior who was gonna be Aelin's sworn sword, but I was so terrified. And he makes Evangeline laugh, and he does cheer her up a little bit, and he goes to leave the room when he turns and looks to Lysandra and says, I lost my family 10 years ago. Tomorrow I will fight for the new one I've made. That's such a beautiful line, and also very tragic. And we're actually going to jump to Lysandra's POV, because right after she heard Adian say that, she's like, oh my word, like, he thinks we're all going to die tomorrow. She definitely has lost hope at this point, but I think it's different when she loses hope versus when she realizes that Adian has also lost hope. That thought haunts her, and she is laying in bed, and literally she the entire night lies awake thinking, I should go see Adian. I should go see Adian. I should go see Adian. Interesting. But the sun rises. She never goes to see Adian. So it's the day of the battle. And she didn't end up going to see him, but she wanted to, which I think is worth noting. So the next morning, she braids Evangeline's hair, and they start heading down for breakfast to eat for what she thinks is probably going to be her last meal, very morbid, when they run into Lord Darrow, and he asks them to, come to the side with him to this weird room that's filled with books. And he basically tells us that all of these books were saved when Orinth was attacked. So these are like the last of the beautiful library that used to be in Orinth. They were like the only ones that were saved post-battle. But there's also one other thing in this room, and it is the King's Flame. So he has it encased in glass, but it was Orlan's. So this is that fiery orange flower that bloomed when Brannon first came to Terrasen, and there's now this like very symbolic belief amongst the people of Terrasen that whenever there's like a king or a queen ruling in Terrasen and a king's flame blooms, it's a sign of like a blessing on the land that this person is like a true rightful ruler. So the last king's flame that bloomed was during Orlan's rule, and he was the one who was ruling when the King of Adarlan took over Terrasen. And we learn that Darrow, when they were being invaded and Orlan's life was ended, he rescued that King's Flame that had bloomed under Orlan's rule and had it encased in glass, and he has been preserving it ever since. On top of that, he gets to why he pulled them over to the side of the room. It wasn't to just show them this flame or the books, but it was to give Evangeline a job, if it's all right with Lysandra, to be his personal messenger between some of the commanders and the generals and the other lords during the day of battle. And this, Lysandra can see, is definitely a way of him trying to keep her distracted, give her something to do so that she's just not sitting in her tower looking out the window, watching everything go down and wondering if Lysandra and Adian are alive. So Lysandra is grateful that Darrow has presented this as an option, and Evangeline seems excited about it. So Lysandra gives her blessing for her ward to be Darrow's messenger during the battle, and Evangeline's obviously excited about it, so she heads off, and Lysandra thanks Darrow. They're definitely not friends. Darrow is still technically a very horrible person that we do not like. But he does share that one of the things that haunts him the most from the day that Tirsen was invaded, other than obviously his lover dying, it was the children and their faces, their reactions, seeing young children know that it's their last day on this earth. Like, that was very hard for him, and that still haunts him to this day. And he doesn't want Evangeline to go through that very haunted feeling, wondering if she's going to make it, wondering if the people she loves are going to make it. And so he wants to rescue Evangeline from that. So although we still don't like him and he's not like amazing, he's not the main villain here. And he does somewhere deep down inside have a heart. Let's jump to Adian's POV. In a very unfortunate circumstance, he is making sure that everyone's in their places, some last second arrangements before the battle is starting, when they see something off in the distance. It is none other than a legion of at least 1,000 witches on wyverns making their way to the battle. And other than the archers and Lysandra, if she takes a wyvern form, we have no protection from the skies. And Adian was like, oh, I thought maybe this battle would last a good portion of today. Now the battle's gonna last maybe a couple hours. Like, this is all gonna be done in a couple hours. Because I will remind you, it took like between 30 and 36 Iron Teeth witches to ransack all of Aderlin in a day. And that was a kingdom in its prime. So imagine what 1,000 Iron Teeth witches are going to be able to do to little old Orinth. This army that has already taken so many hits over the last couple, months at this point. In this moment, he turns towards Lysandra and he just says, take Evangeline and run. He's like, I don't want you fighting in this battle. I don't want you turning into a wyvern and fighting from the skies. I don't want you doing anything. I want you to take Evangeline and run, because I cannot bear the thought of you two not making it to the end of the day. And Lysandra points out that he is not begging any of his other allies to run when he says, because I am not in love with our other allies. Okay, I'm a sucker for romance and love confessions. I love that line. No matter how I feel about what Adian has done and whether or not Lysandra and him should be good, or if she should forgive him for everything that has happened, look, put all that to the side. I love that confession. That being said, there are so many good love confessions in all of Throne of Glass. So the question of this part for our book club is, in the comments down below, put your favorite love confession so far from the entire Throne of Glass books. I think we have officially had all of our love confessions, or at least all the love confessions from the main characters. I don't remember there being any more, but I could be very much wrong about that. So anyways, while you're typing those comments, let's get back to what's going down here. Lysandra begins to cry, but she doesn't respond to Adian's love confession in this moment. She just stands next to him and holds his hand. Whether or not this is a confirmation that she feels the same way, we're not quite sure, but this is a confirmation that she is in fact staying and she is not leaving Adian. But then, as if things weren't already crazy enough, they hear some shouting from their side, and they turn around to see that from behind there are 13 witches on wyverns coming in, and they're like, oh my word, they're hitting us from the back as well. You've got to be kidding me. We are not going to survive. However, Adian recognizes exactly who this is. It is Manon and the 13. And so they land to where Adian is so that Manon can talk to Adian, and Darrow comes running over freaking out. And at first he thinks he's like a messenger, like coming to deliver a message or a negotiation from Erewhon. But Manon's like, no, we're here to fight for you. She says, we come to honor a friend. We came to honor a promise made to Aelin Galathinius to fight for what she promised us. Emphasis on she, okay? Darrow asks, okay, what did she promise you? Because in his mind, he's like, she has no right to make any promises, okay? But Manon's response is, a better world. Long ago, the Crocians fought beside Terrasen to honor the great debt we owed the Fae King Brandon for granting us a homeland. For centuries, we were your closest allies and friends. We heard your call for aid, and we have come to answer it. Beautiful moment, truly. And then, sure enough, thousands, and I mean thousands upon thousands of Crocian witches show up shortly after them on their broomsticks, ready to fight against the Iron Teeth witches. Chapter 82, this is Manon's POV as her and her 5 5,000 witches are ready to fight the Iron Teeth. So we have 5 times as many people. Like I said, we're on broomsticks, not wyverns, so there is a bit of a disadvantage there. However, we definitely have the numbers. All the Croatian witches land, and Manon starts talking with them about game plans and how they're going to do things, how they're going to, split up and all of that. And I will remind you that Manon was quite literally wing leader of all of the Iron Teeth. And all the Iron Teeth have now seen that Manon is there and leading the Croatians. She not only knows all of their formations and attack plans, she literally invented them. She created them. She knows their strengths and the weaknesses of every single play that the Iron Teeth could pull out in this moment. So she is spending this time educating the Croatians on all the different formations that she had created and basically the best way to hit at their weaknesses. So this is honestly such a mic drop moment for Manon, but I can imagine being a terrifying moment for all the Iron Teeth on Erewhon's side. And if you're wondering why we have time to do all this, the arrival of the witches threw Erewhon's armies off so much that they actually do not approach for the rest of the day. So they continue to stay out on the battlefield. No one, fires that first arrow. We are delaying this battle at least one more day, which is great because we need to give Aelin as much time as possible to get there. There's also an aspect to this that Manon thinks that they're going to be using that time to try to get the witch towers back up and running after Lysandra and Aedian's plan to break apart some of them worked. We're going to jump to Lysandra's POV though for later that night when she decides to go find Aedian. And she's like, hey, so here's the thing. I heard what you said. I want some time to think about how I'm going to respond to it, but I do plan to respond. So it would be really not good if you died in battle tomorrow. So I need you to survive. And if you do survive, then I can give you my answer. And Aedian's like, if I survive tomorrow, can I also get a kiss? Oh, flirty boy. And she says, how about this? If you survive tomorrow, we'll have a conversation. And if that conversation leads to a kiss, then so be it. Chapter 83. This is in Dorian's POV as he is flying his wings off as a wyvern from Morath. At some point in his journey, he does decide to take a break, to eat, and to drink, but he decides before he takes off again, he's going to transform back into his human form and summon Gavin one more time. And this is actually a really sweet moment. He wants to let Gavin know that he succeeded because now that he has the 3 word keys, it's only a matter of time before they forge the lock. And once they do forge the lock, Elena will cease to exist in her eternity with Gavin. And so Dorian just says like, hey, cherish your last moments together. We have the 3 word keys. We're still going to go ahead and do this. But just wanted to let you know like your time with her is limited. Gavin is grateful for the warning. And then Dorian actually goes ahead and says like, also, I want to let you know because I know you were really upset about me just like abandoning Rifthold. I just want to let you know that I have a plan to leave it in good hands and I'm not going to, leave a bunch of loose ends untied. And Gavin just says that he knows that and he believes that and thanks him for that reassurance. And then they bow to each other. And it's like this very tender, sweet moment between 2 kings who love the same kingdom. And then after they hang up, I guess, like from their magical communication portal or whatever that they're using, Dorian shifts back into his wyvern form to keep flying to find Aelin when he sees something in the skies. It is a ton of Iron Teeth witches on wyverns, and so he decides to, right when the last of the group is passing, to go up and kind of fly behind them in a disguise to see where they're going and hoping that maybe wherever they're going Aelin will also be. Chapter 84 is a pretty short one. We get a quick little POV of Manon getting the Croatians and the 13 ready the morning of the battle, and then we get Lysandra's POV as she is making her way under Orinth to these secret waterways that were built under the castle. So there's like this little like ravine or river, I guess it's not really that little, but there's a river that goes across the battlefield. And apparently this river has like a secret entrance into the bottom of the castle at Orinth. And so Lysandra shifts into a creature and dives into that water because she has a plan. And we're going to find out what that plan is very soon. But before that, let's jump to Aedian's POV. He has confirmed that everyone is in place and realizes that nothing else is going to delay this battle from starting in this moment. So he turns towards Ren and his buddies and says, let's make this fight worthy of a song. And so the battle begins. Chapter 85, Manon's POV from the skies. She is looking for her Blackbeak matron grandmother, but can't find her, or the other matron either. However, far, far back, at the very back of the Legion of 1,000 Wyverns, she can see a big honkin' wyvern that belongs to no one other than Iskra Yellowlegs. And Manon in this moment is like, oh yeah, Iskra's coming for me. Like that battle is waiting for me. I know that 1v1, that's going to be happening today. Down below though, Adian has called for the start of the battle, and so Manon and her Crocians begin their attack on the Iron Teeth as well. Lysandra POV as she is under the water in a white sea dragon form so that she can hide in the icy cold water. Once she hears that the battle has begun, she launches out of the water and is right next to a group of Valg foot soldiers and takes them out. But by the time they start to, recover from the surprise of this literal creature jumping out of the river at their front lines, she jumps back into the water and they can't find her again because she's doing a really good job, like being discreet as a white sea wyvern thing. And then she would swim somewhere else in the river and then jump out and surprise them. So she's pretty much doing this whole jack-in-a-box thing where she's just jumping out, attacking, and then whenever they gain their bearings and they start fighting back, she jumps back into the water and then goes somewhere else to do it again. Back in Adian's POV, we can see that he is doing everything he can to hold the wall, everything from using the archers to using catapults to even using the fire lances. And then hours later, obviously, eventually the siege ladders do get up the walls, and there's a couple of Valg foot soldiers that get up, but they are shot down like immediately when they get up there. However, Adian then finds himself face to face with a Valg prince. Chapter 86. Adian gets in a head-to-head with this Valg prince, but it's obviously not a fair fight because the Valg prince has magic and Adian just has his sword. However, he has a sword and a shield. When the Valg prince shoots his magic at the shield, it ricochets off of this shield, which is not a normal thing to happen, and even the Valg prince himself is like very shocked by this. And Adian realizes that he is using Ro's shield, which is a family heirloom, right? And so he's like, oh my word, like this goes back to the days of the previous Valg wars. This shield is embedded with magic to protect me against Valg magic. It's just a really cool moment. This shield might be the only thing that saves Adian in this moment. However, the Valg prince does get him with a dagger. Unfortunate, but I will say Adian does hold up long enough for Ren to come and help, and Ren takes out the Valg prince with a bow and arrow. Adian is grateful, but he is now bleeding a lot, and he ends up actually passing out in this moment, and it's like freaky for a second because it's like, is Adian gonna be okay? But we learn very quickly from Evangeline's POV, which we don't get Evangeline POVs like hardly ever, but we get an Evangeline POV for a quick second when she is delivering a message for Darrow and hears that Adian has been delivered to like a healing tent. So he's currently being taken care of by healers and he's gonna be fine, but he just needs to rest because the Valg prince did get him pretty good. Chapter 87, we're going to go to Aylin's POV as they are continuing their travels up to Terrasen, and they've set up camp for that night, but she is not sleeping because Rowan is re-tattooing her back. Not only is he redoing the tattoo that Maeve completely wiped from her body, but he's also creating a new one that is like their love story, so very cute. But we learn through their conversation that they are going to be passing Endovier tomorrow on their travels. And that is the salt mine where Aylin was a slave at the very beginning of the first book in Throne of Glass. Rowan in this moment is like, do you want me to tear it down? Like, I will go and burn it down for you tonight. Like, tell me what you need. Tell me what you want. And she's appreciative of this, but she's like, honestly, the place is empty. There's no guards to speak of. It would just be a waste of your magic. I'm just not excited to see it when we pass it. That's all. Now we jump to Elide's POV as she's in a tent with Lorcan after a long day of healing with Urine. Urine has also given Elide that salve that we talked about. So it's like the painkiller, right? It's basically a magical ibuprofen lotion. And so Lorcan takes the salve and he's like massaging it into her ankle for her. And while he's doing that, they have some conversations about, like how she feels about the way things were left with her uncle, but mostly how she feels about parents. Because I guess when we did interrogations with Uncle Vernon, he mentioned something about parents being like completely destroyed in one of the battles before they got to Orinth. And Lorcan's like, how do you feel about rebuilding it? And she's like, I've never been a lady before, so rebuilding it's going to be scary, but they kind of indicate that, like, you know, like maybe we can rebuild it together, you know? And then one thing leads to another, and Elide and Lorcan get jiggy with it. Now we're going to jump to Aylin's POV, and this part's kind of confusing, so I'm really pulling from my personal interpretation. We find her in a nightmare, and in this nightmare, she's kind of reliving every choice that she has ever had to make, and then every choice laying before her, and it all kind of results in her being back in the iron box that Maeve put her in. And to me, what this is trying to tell us, or what Sarah J. Maas in this moment is trying to tell us, although Aylin is free, she does not feel free because she is being forced to make choices that she doesn't want to make. And unfortunately, there's like the choice she wants to make and the choice she knows she should make. So although she is free, she does not feel free from the choices that she has to make. She feels like she is still technically in the iron box, just in her own mind and heart. So that's my interpretation. If you have a different interpretation of the dream that happens in chapter 87, by all means, please put it in the comments. I would love to hear them. But we're going to jump forward to after she wakes up. They're continuing the journey. They're about to pass Endovir, which, by the way, we learn is in the Rune Mountains. The Rune Mountains. Now, if you have read Crescent City, you know that there is a character named Rune. Now, what the connection is between this character in Crescent City and these mountains in Throne of Glass, I have no clue, but I feel like that has to be a Maasverse hint of some sort. Like, that's such a random thing that there's this character named Rune in Crescent City, and then there's the Rune Mountains in Throne of Glass. I have heard so many theories as to why these mountains are named the Rune Mountains and like what connections it might have to this Crescent City character. If you have any theories, also please put those in the comments. I'm very excited. I hope we have some good comments for me to read through after this video is posted. Anyway, so they are passing Endovir in this moment when they see a wyvern in the sky, and they panic because they're like, oh my word, what if there's more wyverns close by? What if the witches are about to see us? We cannot afford a skirmish or a battle right now. We need to get to Terrasen ASAP. And this wyvern sees them and beelines for them. And they start freaking out. However, as it begins to land in the woods, it shifts. And so they run off to investigate, and sure enough, the wyvern was none other than Dorian. And Aylin in this moment meets Dorian's eyes, and she can just tell by his face, although she is so excited to see him, it is immediately going from a happy moment to a terrified moment when she realizes that he in fact does have all 3 word keys with him. Chapter 88, Adian's POV is he is waking up from a coma, and we learn that it has been an hour and the walls of Orinth are still holding up despite the fact that he was not there to help. He's also really thankful for his Fae genetics that he got from Gavriel in this moment because it did help escalate his healing, and if he was fully human, he definitely would not be able to go back into helping the battle right now. Arguably, he is still not in a good enough place to help in battle right now, but it's good enough for Adian, so of course he is running back out there to the front lines. However, before he gets there, he checks for Lysandra, and sure enough, he can see her off in the distance fighting as this sea wyvern and that she's doing well. However, he can see that certain Valg soldiers have picked up on the fact that this river has to connect to the castle somehow. So there are a bunch of Valg foot soldiers now following the path of the river to try to get into Orinth another way, aka using the underground waterways. This sparks Adian back into action because he needs to do something about this ASAP. Now we're going to jump to Manon's POV as she's being signaled by Adian in this moment, and it takes her a minute, but he's like gesturing towards, you know, the secret waterways, and it takes her a second, and she's like, oh, like they figured that out. We need to make sure that no one gets in through the waterways and we block it. However, me and the 13 can't go do that right now because we're the only ones on wyverns. We can't leave all the Crocians up here alone. And in this moment of hesitation where Manon doesn't know what to do, none other than Iskra Yellowlegs swoops in, and her wyvern clamps its jaws around Abraxos's neck. Chapter 89, Abraxos starts to dive while he is not able to breathe. And it's not actually him falling, he is actually diving. And Manon realizes in this moment it is so that when he inevitably does not survive this, that when Manon falls off of him, or when he falls, that she doesn't have far to fall and that she will be safe. Manon truly believes in this moment that, it's the end. And so she just turns to Iskra and starts screaming at her, begging for her to spare Abraxos's life. However, who other than Petra Blueblood comes swooping in on her wyvern and attacks Iskra, causing Iskra's wyvern to take its jaws off of Abraxos's neck. And in this moment, Manon realizes that Petra is saving Abraxos from the same fate as Keely, because Keely was Petra's wyvern that in Heir of Fire, Iskra Yellowlegs pulled an illegal move during the War Games and got Keely killed. In this moment, as Petra does this, a bunch of the Iron Teeth then in a moment switch and start fighting the other Iron Teeth. And Petra looks to Manon and says, "For a better world." So our trip to the Varian Gap was worth it, because it seems that Manon got through to them, and Petra, along with a bunch of other witches in this moment, are now fighting with Manon and the Crocians. Because of this, Manon feels like, okay, there are wyverns in the sky helping. Now me and the 13 can go take care of this waterway and make sure it's covered and that no Valkfoot soldiers get to it. And while they are running off to do that, she can see in the distance as Petra goes after Iskra. And in a very, very satisfying takedown, we watch as Petra and her wyvern take down Iskra and her wyvern for good. So Keely has officially been avenged. So the 13 makes it to the waterway right as these Valkfoot soldiers are about to find their way into Orinth. They take out all of these men so that none of them survive, and then they move all of these boulders to cover the waterways now so that no one else can get in. However, throughout this whole process, Abraxos is struggling, and it's getting harder and harder for him to do this successfully. And so they go back and they fly over the walls to rest. Immediately Manon gets off of Abraxos, and the rest of the 13 come over, and they're all putting their hands on his neck to try to stifle the bleeding as a bunch of healers come to see what they can do for Abraxos. Let's jump to Lysandra's POV as she switches from her sea dragon form that she's been fighting into a wyvern, and she flies back over Orinth's walls, one, to chew out Adian for being back on the battlefield so soon because he needs to rest, 2, to make sure that Abraxos is going to be okay and that Manon's going to be okay. And then 3, to inform Ren and Adian that it looks like they got one of the witch towers back up and running, and it's only a matter of time before they strike with it. And you remember what happened last time they used a witch tower? It was not pretty, okay? It took out a huge part of our army in a matter of seconds. Sure enough, they look towards the witch tower right as one of the witches falls in, begins to glow, and there's an explosion, and they brace themselves to see what area of their army is about to be obliterated, but they're shocked. The explosion did not launch forward at them, but it launched straight up into the skies, and in a huge radius obliterates not only the Iron Teeth that were up there, but our Crocians that were up in that area. So they don't even care that they're taking out their own. They're just trying to take out as many is possible. Let's jump to Manon's POV in this moment as she just watched this happen, and I'll remind you, she has learned a lot about these witch towers, and her grandmother was a big part of creating them, so she knew a lot about them, and she kind of had an idea of what they could do. But this is her first time seeing it in action, and she is mortified. She can also see as Petra and some of the other Iron Teeth, as well as a bunch of Crocians, are trying to get to the witch tower to destroy it before it can strike again, but unfortunately none of them can make it. It is so well guarded and so well protected, and in this moment Manon knows that quite literally only her and her 13, the best of all of the Iron Teeth witch clans, is even capable of making it to the witch tower. However, Abraxos can't fly, and she turns to Lysandra and asks her to shape shift into a wyvern so that she can ride Lysandra, but Lysandra is so magically drained that she can't actually shift into a large creature right now. She needs at least an hour of rest before she can shift again. And in this moment, Manon is like, you guys realize that we have maybe 5 minutes before they're going to shoot again, and we have no idea where they're going to shoot at and what they're going to take out, so the 13 need to get up there ASAP. Now, in full transparency, I am not going to be able to do this next part justice with a summary, so I'm just going to read this next part and try not to cry. But they all looked at one another like they'd had some unspoken conversation and agreement. The 13 stalked towards their own mounts. Sorrel clasped Manon's shoulder as she passed, then climbed onto her wyvern's back, leaving Astrid before Manon. Her second, her cousin, her friend, smiled, eyes bright as stars. Live, Manon. Astrid smiled wider, kissed Manon's brow, and whispered again, live. Manon didn't see the blow coming. The punch to her gut, so hard and precise that it knocked the wind out of her, sent her to her knees. She was struggling to get a breath down, to get up, when Astrid reached Nareen and mounted the blue mare, gathering the reins. Bring our people home, Manon. Manon knew then what they were going to do. But Astrid and the 13 were already in the skies. Already in formation, that battering ram that had served them so well, spearing towards the battlefield, towards the approaching witch tower. Manon was distantly aware of the shifter and Prince Adian coming up beside her, Lord Wren with them, distantly aware of the silence that fell over the castle, the city, the walls. As all of them watched that witch tower approach, their doom gathering within it, as the 13 raced for it, raced against the wind and death itself, a wall of iron teeth rose up before the tower, blocking their path. 100 against 12. Inside the witch tower, close enough now that Manon could see through the open archway of the uppermost level, a young witch in black robes stepped towards the hollowed interior, stepped towards where Manon's grandmother stood, gesturing to the pit below, so we have officially found the Blackbeak grandmother as well. The 13 neared the enemy in their path and did not falter. The maneuver was perfect, more flawless than any they'd done. They had seconds until the young witch summoned the power and unleashed the yielding in a blast of blackness. The 13 punched through the iron teeth, spreading wide, pushing them to the side, clearing a path right to the tower as Astrid swept in from the back, aiming for the uppermost level. Imogen went down first. Then Lynn and Ghislaine, her wyverns swarmed by their enemy. Then Thea and Kaya together, as they always had been. Then the green-eyed demon twins, laughing as they went. Then Shadows, Etta, and Briar, arrows still firing, still finding their marks. Then Vesta, roaring her defiance to the skies. And then Sorrel. Sorrel, who held the way open for Astrid, a solid wall for Manon's second as she soared in. A wall against whom the waves of iron teeth broke and broke. The young witch inside the tower began glowing black, steps from the pit. Beside Manon, Lysandra and Adian wrapped their arms around each other, ready for the end, heartbeats away. And then Astrid was there. Astrid was barreling towards the open stretch of air for the tower itself, bought with lives of the 13, with their final stand. Manon could only watch, and watch, shaking her head as if she could undo it, as Astrid removes her leathers, the shirt beneath, as Astrid rose in the saddle, freed of the buckles, a dagger in hand, as her wyvern aimed straight for the tower. Manon's grandmother turned then, away from the pit, the acolyte about to leap inside and destroy them all. Astrid hurled her dagger. The blade flew true. It plunged into the acolyte's back, sending the witch sprawling to the stones, a foot away from the drop to the pit. Astrid drew the twin swords from the sheath at her hips and slammed her wyvern into the side of the tower. The crack of bone on rock echoed across the world. But Astrid was already leaping, already arching through the air, swords raised, wyvern tumbling away beneath, Nareen's body broken on impact. Manon began screaming then, screaming endless and wordless, as that thing in her chest, as her heart shattered, as Astrid landed in the witch tower's open archway, swords swinging at the witches who rushed to kill her. They may as well have been blades of grass. Might as well have been mist for how easily Astrid cut them down, one after another, driving forward towards the matron who had branded the letters on stark display across Astrid's abdomen. Unclean. Okay. Twirling, twisting, blades flying, Astrid slaughtered her way towards Manon's grandmother. The High Witch of the Blackbeak clan backed away, shaking her head. Her mouth moved as she breathed, Astrid, no. But Astrid was already there, and it was not darkness, but light. Light, bright, and pure as the sun on snow that erupted from Astrid. Light, as Astrid made the yielding. As the 13, their broken bodies scattered around the tower in a near circle, made the yielding as well. Light, they all burned with it, radiated it. Light that flowed from their souls, their fierce hearts, as they gave themselves over to that power, became incandescent with it. Astrid tackled the Blackbeak matron to the ground, Manon's grandmother little more than a shadow against the brightness, then little more than a scrap of hate and memory as Astrid exploded. As she and the 13 yielded completely and blew themselves in the witch tower to smithereens. Okay. I am unwell. Obviously, I cut out bits and pieces here and there. That wasn't the whole last 3 pages of the chapter, but the 13 are officially gone. Chapter 90, in Manon's POV, a couple hours after the 13 completed the yielding, we learn that Morath drew back for the day. After what the 13 did, the battle just ended. Morath drew back, and it seems like the battle is going to wait until tomorrow. Manon goes out towards the crumpled witch tower to where all the ash now is that the 13 completed their yielding. And all of the witches, as well as the fae and the humans and the pirates and all of the allies also come out to the tower to pay their respects to the witches. For hours, Manon knelt on the battlefield, Abraxos at her side, as if she might stay with them, her 13, a little while longer. And far away across the snow-covered mountains, on a barren plain before the ruins of a once great city, a flower began to bloom. So we start with chapter 91, Dorian's POV as he is looking down. Oh, hold on. So Dorian looks down and he sees what cannot be mistaken for anything else other than the Cognate army. And in this moment, he's like, Kale succeeded. You know, that's what we sent him down to the southern continent to do. So he swoops down. He sees Aelin and Rowan in them, but he sees who he's really looking for, and that is Kale. And they run to each other. They're hugging. They're crying. They're best friends. They're brothers, okay? And listen, I don't care if you're a Kale hater. Kale and Dorian's friendship is so sweet. Like, despite, like, it gives me such Arthur and Merlin, but like in the later seasons kind of vibes. It's very, very sweet. We also get it in Kale's POV, but after their sweet embrace moment, he then turns and introduces the woman who is responsible for him being able to run to Dorian and being able to walk again and healing his spine. But not only that, she's also his wife, and she's also carrying his child. So it's like, surprise, meet this person, Yrene, who has now become one of the most important people in my life. Or actually, scrap that. Has become the most important person in my life. It's all very sweet. It's all very tender. However, he says what Aelin is waiting for him to say, which she could tell from the moment he landed, just based off the look on his face. He does, in fact, have all 3 word keys. He tells them about how he got them in his journey in Morath and everything that went down there. He also tells us that that was 3 days ago now, okay? So is your timeline starting to like meld together? He also learned that those witches that he was flying behind, because remember he got in a wyvern form and was kind of like meshing in with them, those are the rest of the Iron Teeth witches and wyverns that are headed to the battle at Terrasen. So what we are currently seeing in the battle at Terrasen is only half of them, okay? Significantly more on their way. He also reveals that although Maeve and Erewhon are not there yet, they are going to be heading there very, very soon. And at this rate, we could actually beat them there if we book it there now. So then we get Aelin's POV, because she realizes in this moment we have 2 choices. We either race Erewhon and Maeve to Terrasen, bust out as much of this army as we can, and then worry about banishing Erewhon later and, like, you know, sealing the word gate, or we seal the word gate now. However, we will not have Aelin and Aelin's power there to help us in the war. Is there a possibility that when we seal the word gate that all of these vowed creatures will disappear and not be a problem anymore? Sure. But can we also take that chance? I will preface, Dorian is also still putting himself on the table as an option, like it's Aelin or Dorian, but in this moment, Aelin's like, no, it's gonna be me, and we're actually gonna put it to a vote. This is the first time we've seen something like this, but Aelin wants to put this to a vote. Now we're going to jump to Rowan's POV, because he is not happy about this. He's like, why are we putting this to a vote? Why is this like a discussion? Another thing, however, on Rowan's mind, which I like pointing these kinds of things out. Full circle moments are my favorite, and we get so many of them, especially towards the end of Kingdom of Ash. But this full circle moment is, it was not lost on Rowan that they stood at a crossroads, like a literal crossroads, okay? They're also standing at a figurative crossroads of like, what decision do we make? But they're also standing at a physical crossroads. Or that Dorian and Aelin and Kale stood in the heart of that crossroads, merely a few miles from the salt mines, where so much of this had begun just over a year ago. We are where it all began, quite literally, or just a few miles from where it began. We're standing in a literal crossroads. There is a figurative crossroads right here, and Kale, Dorian, and Aelin are at the heart of this decision. Also, can we take a minute? Just over a year ago. The entirety of this series takes place in a year. I know a lot of people who couldn't even read the book series in a year if they tried, okay? Like, that is crazy. that all of this stuff has happened in one single year. This has been a very tiring and exhausting year for Aelin, no doubt. Anyways, they are all standing around, and I will say it's not just Kale, Dorian, Yrene, Aelin, and Rowan. Like Hussar and Kashin and Sartok and Nesrin, like they're all there to have this discussion and be a part of this vote. They are thinking of like, maybe those aren't the two options. Maybe there's a third option or a fourth option. So they start throwing out ideas. No one can think of anything that another person can't immediately shoot down. And then Rowan brings up his idea of Yrene healing the Val God of Erewhon. Now, Aelin doesn't love that he brought this up necessarily because, you know, that was something she shut down immediately. Yrene is pregnant. So after some back and forth, they decide, you know what, it's either do it now or do it later. Let's take a vote. And sure enough, everyone but Rowan votes that Aelin does it now. It's so painful to know everything that Aelin has done and everything that Aelin has sacrificed and how it means everything to her to go fight and protect her kingdom, but everyone votes that she does it now. With the exception of Rowan, of course. And that is very painful. It's so hard to read because, like, how much more can this girl give? And Rowan votes no, and he's mad that anyone even voted for now. And then Alid turns to Aelin and asks Aelin what her vote is, to which she just responds, it doesn't matter. And unfortunately, she's right. She's outnumbered. And what's it gonna do? Either she's gonna lie and say she wants to do it, because obviously she doesn't want to sacrifice herself, or she can say, no, I don't want to do it. But one, she's outnumbered, and two, she's just gonna make all of her friends feel even worse about their decision. Because they're not, like, flippantly like, yeah, sacrifice Aelin, let's go. Like, even Hussar, who doesn't have an emotional connection to Aelin and isn't friends with Aelin, recognizes that they would do so much better in this war with Aelin's magic. And, of course, with, like, the queen at the head of things, and she's the one who's summoned all these allies to fight for Terrasen. So, like, clearly things would be much easier with Aelin around. However, like, they don't want to take the chance. So Aelin does not place a vote. And with that, they decide that Aelin is going to forge the lock and seal the gate at dawn. Chapter 92 is actually in Aelin's POV, and she reveals to us, the reader, that she suggested putting it up to a vote, not just because she believes in democracy, but because she refers to it as the coward's way out, which I think none of us are reading this thinking that Aelin's a coward for that decision. But that's how she feels about herself in this moment. She firmly believes that, like, you know, I couldn't make the decision. Like, she doesn't want to be responsible for this decision. She's tired making the decisions. And of course, she's going to be very biased in her decision. She doesn't know if what she's going to pick is actually going to be best for everyone or what's best for her in this moment, because it's her life. And I think the part that kind of just, like, makes this hurt even more is that it's, like, obviously the night before, and she feels ill because she knows it's her last day on this earth. She can't sleep, clearly, and all she can think about is that she regrets not requesting of them that they do it on Terrasen soil. Like, instead of doing it in the place that she's been fighting so hard for the past year to get to, she has to do it in front of Endovir, the salt mines, like literally one of the worst places ever for her. So that's just like a little twist in the knife that's already in our hearts, you know? Rowan, on the other hand, is mad. Like, he is livid even at Aelin. Like, he's like, you should have spoken up. You should have said no. You should have argued that we should go to Terrasen first and then you sacrifice later. Like, Rowan is not very happy with her decision in this moment. He goes as far as to suggest that maybe do what Elena did and push it off on someone else. And Aelin, of course, says, no, that's not an option. I wouldn't do this to anyone else. And then he suggests, he's like, Dorian seems willing to do it. Why don't we let Dorian do it instead? And she says, no, he's just as important as me. Like, I can't, you know, this is my sacrifice to make. Also, she makes a comment that Elena and Nehemia both at one point said that Dorian was a backup and he wasn't ready to make this sacrifice. So because of that, she also believes it just has to be her. Rowan suggests they stay up late in the night and research another option, or maybe wait another couple days and research more options. Aelin says no, like, everyone voted, it's gonna be at dawn, so it's gotta be at dawn. And then Rowan throws out another idea. What if forces didn't lead Dorian into our path so you alone might pay the debt? What if they brought you together, not to pick one or the the other, but to share the burden with each other. That day you destroyed the glass castle, when you joined hands, your power. I've never seen anything like it. You were able to meld your powers to become one. If the lock demands all of you, then why not give it half of each of you, when you both bear Mala's blood? And Aelin in this moment is like, actually, you might be onto something. So sure enough, they go to Dorian's tent. They throw out the idea to Dorian and ask him. Aelin's like, I don't even want to ask this of you. I'm sorry to even ask. And he's like, no, I'm sorry. I didn't even think of it. Let's do it. He literally doesn't even hesitate. He's like, let's go right now. And they do decide. They're like, let's just do this right now. Middle of the night, no audience, just Dorian and Aelin. And obviously Rowan's with them. And so they say like, hey, since like Rowan's here to support me, do you want to bring Kale? And Dorian's like, yeah, I would love to have Kale there as my support. So they go then to Kale's tent and wake him up and then head over to seal the word gate. Chapter 94, all four of us are now in Endovir. Aelin writes 2 very large word marks in the ground that her and Dorian are going to be standing in. And the 2 word marks translate to lock and unlock. Her and Dorian then turn to Kale and Rowan and say they're hopefully not goodbyes, but see you laters. Then they step into the word marks, cut their palms, and join hands and begin this ritual of sorts. I will say some little side note here that I think is really stinking cute, but also not cute, like adorable, cute, like makes me want to cry. Aelin in this moment goes through her whole like paying homage to Sam and says like, my name is Aelin Asherver Galathinius and I will not be afraid, which is what Sam taught her that he did as like a coping mechanism whenever he was anxious. And so she does that in this moment. There's so many homages paid to Sam in Kingdom of Ash. I think he was definitely very much like front of mind for Sarah J. Maas when she wrote this book, because there's so many Easter eggs here and there. Even like the Easter egg of how long Aelin was in captivity with Maeve. Like there's just so many things. There's also, we'll get to it later actually in another part, but actually the next part. So part 10. So you gotta stay tuned for part 10, right? You gotta subscribe so you can get notified so that you know when part 10 comes out. There is another really cute Easter egg that points back to Sam. So anyways, Aelin has the 3 word keys now, and we learned, I guess, from Kaltain, the way that Erewhon had it like embedded in her arm, we learned that like, oh, he was going to use her that way, so like that's what needs to be done. So Aelin splices open her arm, they shove all 3 word keys into her arm, and then the word keys dissolve into her bloodstream. And then we get Rowan's POV as he watches both Aelin and Dorian still standing next to each other, but it's like their souls leave their body, like they are just vacant, and clearly they are like elsewhere. Chapter 94 is an Aelin's POV as they enter into this like word gate in between worlds world, and Aelin herself has become the gate, and I guess that means her and Dorian are kind of like in her subconscious, but all that matters is they're in this place and they see all these like gates and doorways, and then all of a sudden it's just like the worst pain they've ever experienced, and it is quite literally all of the magic being sucked from both Aelin and Dorian's bodies. In some of the worst pain that Aelin has ever experienced, she looks over at Dorian, and in this moment she's like, it's still gonna take all of us. It's just now gonna take all of both of us. So she knows like, I'm not gonna survive this, and neither is Dorian so long as we're both here. Then we get Dorian's POV as he as well is going through the worst pain he's ever experienced. He's also realizing that they're both gonna die, and in this moment he tries to yell at Aelin to stop. Like, they need to stop, they need to regroup, they need to refigure out a different plan because this clearly isn't working, but he can't get the words out because he's in so much pain. And then he hears a different voice from behind him telling them to stop, and he turns around to see none other than his father, the King of Adarlan, or the previous deceased King of Adarlan, because Dorian's technically the King of Adarlan now. Chapter 95, Dorian POV, is he is looking at his dad, but he's a little confused because he's like, this isn't quite my dad. Like, this is a version of my dad that has humanity and life in him, and he realizes like how deeply infested his dad was with the Valg that he never really like noticed. But for the first time he's seeing his father, and his father looks like, you know, like a kind, normal human man. Dorian and Aelin are a little bit confused as to like what this dude is doing here in the middle of like these worlds and their gates, and he reveals that Dorian, using the Sword of Truth Damaris, because he's wearing it, summoned him. Dorian in this moment can't believe it, but he's like, I guess I'm wearing it Like, and he's not wearing it like in Aylin's subconscious right now. Like, he's wearing it in the real world, and he's like, maybe I did summon my dad? That's really, really weird. And then the King of Adarlan turns to them and he says, let me pay this price for you. And they're like, what do you mean? You can't do that. And he's like, yes, I can. Nameless is my price. And the craziest thing happens. Guys, what is the King of Adarlan's name? You don't know. Why don't you know? Because we were never told. Even in Dorian's POVs from book 1, when he refers to his own father, he calls him the King of Adarlan. Anyone has only ever called him the King of Adarlan. We never got a name. And, you know, this isn't just Sarah J. Maas being crafty with us. We learn in this moment that even Aelin and Dorian realizes in this moment he doesn't even know his own father's name. Aelin is realizing she's never heard him been called by any sort of name. He's only ever just been the King of Adarlan. It is because Erewhon literally wiped the king's name from existence. The King of Adarlan himself doesn't even remember his own name. Do you remember when Dorian was invested by a Valg prince at the end of Era of Fire and throughout Queen of Shadows? He forgot his name. That was one of the first things he forgot, that he couldn't remember, until of course he looked at Manon, and then he was like, wait, Dorian? Like, is that my name, right? And I think he also remembered his name looking at Kale or Aelin, looking at one of them. He also had a moment where he was like, wait, I think my name's Dorian, right? So like he had these pockets of moments where he like thought he remembered his name, but forgetting his name was like one of the first things that the Valg prince wiped from him. Like, it was a huge part of his humanity. It's your identity, you know? So when Dorian was hanging on for dear life, trying not to let the Valg prince take over, he was constantly working to remember his name. Now imagine that was a Valg prince, okay? Now imagine a Valg king and their ability to wipe your name from your own memory. Not even just your memory, but he wiped the King of Adarlan's name from the brains of literally everyone, and no one questioned it. So not only is that crazy, but let's go back to what this means. That means that Nameless is my price. Not only are Dorian and Aelin a descendant of Nameless, right? Brannon, the bastard's mark, but also so is the King of Adarlan. So he asks if he can pay this debt and pay this price. And Dorian in this moment, remember, he's been wrestling with like, did I make the right decision in killing my own father? Like, was my father an evil person? And even in this moment, Dorian is really struggling with the concept that his dad might not be a horrible person. So in this moment, he's like, sure, yeah, you know, take our place. Like, we shouldn't have to pay this sacrifice, but like, you know, you did stuff, so like maybe it should be on you. And so Aelin turns to the King of Adarlan and she was like, yeah, take his place. And Dorian's like, wait, what? Not realizing that the King of Adarlan wasn't trying to take both of their places. He was only gonna take Dorian's. Because if you think about it, Aelin has a ton of power. Dorian has a ton of power. Obviously, it's gonna require a lot of power to close this word gate, because really, if you think about it, why else would it have to be Aelin or Dorian? Why couldn't it have been anyone else generations earlier? Because power like Aelin's and Dorian's has not existed in a long time, okay? Maybe it's because Dorian's his descendant, or maybe it's because there's still like a remnant of Valg power that he has somehow clung on to in this afterlife. But we learn that he does have a little bit of power, and it's enough to help support Aelin to help this. So Aelin turns to Dorian in this moment and says, one of us has to rule. And Dorian in this moment realizes what she plans to do, and she shoves him with her magic, and he ends up waking up and snapping out of it. Chapter 96, Rowan's POV, is he's really confused why Dorian snapped back to reality and collapsed to his knees and is gasping for breath, and why Aelin is still, you know, the way that she is. We also learn that in that very short time that we had in Aelin and Dorian's POV, it has been hours in the real world, okay? So Dorian wakes up, Kale and Rowan are rightfully very confused, and they're like, dude, what happened? And Dorian tells them about like his father showing up and how they both were gonna die, but then his father came up and he's apparently nameless, and then Aelin kicked him out. And Rowan in this moment is like, no, I know my Fireheart. This has been her plan all along. She only really agreed to the Dorian thing so that I would agree to let her do this. So he realizes in this moment that Aelin lied to him. Let's jump to Aelin's POV, because she knows in this moment that when Dorian wakes up, Rowan's gonna realize that she lied to him. She was never planning on letting Dorian die. She was always planning to shove him back into the real world because she did not believe, like, it was too good to be true that it would just take half of both of them. She was like, no, like, I'm not gonna do this, but if this is what gets Rowan to, like, let me seal the word gate, then that's what I'm gonna go along with. So it's very unfortunate, but that is the case. And she's like, you know what? It may be the King of Aderlin and the man that I feared my whole life, but I'm glad at least someone is here with me at the end. So we're forging the lock together, and we are almost done forging the lock when the King of Aderlin turns to Aelin and says, I was given a message for you. Your parents are so very proud of you. They asked me to tell you that they love you so very much and that the debt has been paid enough, Fireheart. And then the King of Aderlin vanishes, most likely banished from eternity because his eternal self has now died, so he's ceasing to exist. A choking scream tore out of her as the last of the lock sealed, as the lock became forged once more, as real as her own flesh, as Aelin's magic completely vanished. Chapter 97, still Aelin's POV as she goes to feel for her fire magic, and there's nothing there. She actually notices not an ember, however, there is one droplet of water, and it is magic like her mother's. Remember, her mother had water magic, and she's like, oh my word, this is a gift. Like, maybe I'm not gonna lose all my magic. Like, I still have my mother's water and I'm still alive. Like, you know, she's getting excited again. However, she then sees 12 figures appear before her, and one of them says, summon us to our world, girl, and let us go home at last. First of all, rude. This girl just gave up all of her fire magic, which was pretty impressive, by the way, to send you home. No thank you, no nothing. And also, in this moment, she realizes, she's like, oh, this wasn't a gift. I have to use this droplet of water to seal their gate once they leave. So they left me a little bit of magic left to seal the gate after they leave and take Erewhon with them. Awesome. Love that for me. So, like, the tiniest moment of joy and happiness and hope that she had is already gone. So she's like taking a moment to process this because it's a lot, right? And the gods start barking at her, being like really impatient, being like, can you like open the gate so we can go now? Like, so rude. However, Aelin looks up and sees that with the 12 gods, there is Elena. Elena's there. And Elena in this moment decides to make a bargain. And listen, I have a lot of feelings about this. Actually, let's make that the question of today's book club. How do you feel about this bargain that Aelin makes? I have a lot of feelings about them, and I try not to be vocal about my opinions in these videos, but I will be vocal about them in the comment section, so I'll discuss with some of y'all down there. However, flashback. Remember when Aelin was asking everyone to vote on like whether or not they fight Erewhon in Terrasen or whether or not they seal the gate right now? Everyone voted now, but we all were standing around throwing around some ideas. So when we were throwing around ideas, Aelin did that for a reason. She wanted to hear that there were options, that there was hope, you know, for other options as well for defeating Erewhon other than sealing this word gate. And even in the moment, like when they suggested Yrene heal the Valgod of Erewhon, even Yrene, you know, if it weren't for the baby, she was like, yeah, like, I think I could maybe possibly manage that. Like, that's a possibility. So Aelin knew there was a possibility of banishing Erewhon without the gods doing it. So in this moment, she takes it upon herself. Why we voted on other things and not this is crazy to me. But she cuts them a deal. She said, leave Erewhon for us to deal with and give Elena her eternity. Let her live out life with Gavin. Which, honestly, at that point, what is the point of any of this? But, like I said, keeping my opinions to myself. So Deanna steps forward, okay? And I will remind you, Deanna is the one that took over Aelin's body at Skulls Bay, and then Aelin took her body back. And then Deanna felt, like, personally offended by this, and apparently has, like, beef with Aelin now because Aelin had the audacity to, like, not let Deanna steal her body and hijack her body and kill her allies and her friends, but okay. So Deanna, we learned way back when in Empire of Storms that she wants revenge. And unfortunately, Deanna gets it in this moment. She steps forward towards Elena and kills her, okay? Elena's gone. Elena ceased to exist for eternity. Like, she's just gone. In other words, basically no deal. She's like, no, not taking you up on that deal. And Aelin is just sitting there like, Oh my word. Like, what? What just happened? Like, Deanna just did that, right? And then to make things even worse, Deanna says, "We do not make bargains with mortals. Not any longer. Keep Erewhon if that is what you wish." And then the gods start walking through the archway that leads back to what we can assume is their old world that they've been trying to get back to this whole time. So you mean to tell me that Aelin is now, with no gratitude whatsoever, doing this huge favor for the gods, basically, sacrificing herself to do so, and now they're getting literally nothing out of it. And she can't change her mind now because she's already given up all of her fire magic and she's already here. Anyways, chapter 98, Rowan's POV. Let's check on Rowan because he's not doing well. Frankly, I'm not doing well either, but this isn't about me. This is about Rowan. So not only has he realized that she lied, not only did he realize that that was their last goodbye, but he also starts to feel their mating bond sever, okay? Mind you, he's been through a severed mating bond before and it wasn't even real. It was like the fake thing. And he was like, he went off in his bird form for like years and Loki went a little bit crazy and that wasn't even a real mating bond, we learned. So Rowan is going through it right now, okay, in this moment, and it's not cute. It's not pretty. Let's jump back to Aelin's POV because she can't believe that all the gods are just walking through the archway and that this was all for nothing. They're not even going to give her Elena's soul for eternity and they're not even going to take Erewhon with them. So it's literally like, what was the point of all of this? She literally, if you think about it, just sacrificed her life to give them a bus ticket home. That's literally what this is. And for what? Like, what have they done for her, honestly? Like, you could argue, technically, they've done a lot for her over the books, and they've guided her in the threads pulling and all of that. Yeah, technically, you could argue that. But, like, I think Aelin would have been just fine without him. However, the last of the 12 gods to walk through the archway back into their old world is none other than Mala, okay? Mala was Elena's mother, right? Who gave up her mortal life for an immortal life as one of the goddesses, right? So at first she seemed really like unfazed by the death of her literal daughter. In the back of Aelin's mind, she remembers words spoken to her. Make sure that they're punished someday. Every last one of them. Who said that? In Crown of Midnight? Kaltain. They will be. Aelin had sworn to Kaltain. They had lied, had betrayed Elena and Irelia as they had believed themselves betrayed. She was no lamb to slaughter, no sacrifice on an altar of the greater good, and she was not done yet. Aelin met Mala's burning stare. Do it, Mala said quietly. Aelin looked past her toward that pristine world that they had sought to return to for so long and realized that Mala knew, saw the thoughts in her own head. So Aelin asks, "Aren't you going to stop me?" To which Mala responds by holding out her hand, and in it lays a kernel of white-hot power. A fallen star is how Aelin describes it. Take it. One last gift to my bloodline for what you offered on her behalf, for fighting for her, Elena, okay? For all of them, when it is done, seal the gate and think of home. The marks will guide you. And Aelin's like a little confused, but she takes the kernel of power, and the confusion dies away when Mala flicks her fingers and word marks start to flow from Aelin's back. Okay. Remember, we talked about when Rowan was re-tattooing Aelin, he told her he had an idea for a new tattoo on her back, and he told her that it was their love story in the Old Fae. Well, it turns out he secretly hid a bunch of word marks in her back, and it was a map home to him. And then Mala says, "to a better world," which tells us not only has she been watching Aelin, but she also realizes that a life without the gods is exactly what Irelia needs for this better world. Aelin's smile turned into a grin, wicked and raging. It did not falter as she found the world she sought. As she dipped into that eternal, terrible power, she had been a slave and a pawn before. She would never be so again, not for them, never for them. The gods began shouting, running towards her as Aelin ripped a hole open in their sky, right into a world she had only seen once, had accidentally opened a portal into one night in the stone castle. Remember at the end of Crown of Midnight, she summoned Nehemia to talk to Nehemia and ask her some questions, and she realizes that it accidentally was a hell realm, and this like creature tried to eat Fleetfoot, and she went in and her fae-ness was revealed to Kale in that moment, like that whole thing, right? So she opens a portal to that hell realm. A door now thrown open. Aelin was still smiling as she closed the archway into the gods' world and left them to it, the sounds of their outraged, frightened screams ringing out. So Aelin did exactly what they wanted. She sealed them into their world, just like they asked. But she may or may not have connected their safe haven in perfect eternity to a hell realm with lots of big scary creatures in it. No longer the happy ending that they dreamed of. And Aelin got her revenge, and I love it. And they deserved it. So, Aelin then pulls out the lock, and then instead of using her water magic to seal it, she uses that kernel of power, that like fallen star magic that Mala gave her, and she uses that to seal the gate. And then right as she goes to seal it, she leaps through one of the gates that she thinks is going to lead her to Rowan. Chapter 99, Aelin, as she jumps through the gate, although she does not wake up in her body like Dorian did, instead she starts falling, okay? Apparently, all of the worlds right now are overlapped, and so she is literally falling, picking up speed, falling through all of these worlds. And she knows she's going too fast. She's like, even if I make it to Rowan and to Irelia, like I'm not going to be able to stop. Now, something really crazy happens here because she's observing these worlds that she's falling through. And I will say, I'm not going to spoil anything for you if you haven't read ACOTAR. I'm going to speak very vaguely, so you're going to be like, okay, what? But if you have read ACOTAR, this is crazy, and I need you to listen in, lock in here, okay? So she's falling through these worlds, and one is a world of rain and green and wind, and then she sees another one that she describes as a world of oceans with no land to be seen, but then this happens. She passed through a world of snow-capped mountains under shining stars, passed over one of those mountains where a winged male stood beside a heavily pregnant female, gazing at those very stars. Fae. They were Fae, but this was not her world. She flung out a hand as if she might signal them, as if they might somehow help her, when she was nothing but an invisible speck of power. The winged male, beautiful beyond reason, snapped his head towards her as she arced across his starry sky. He lifted a hand as if in greeting. A blast of dark power, like a gentle summer night, slammed into her, not to attack, but to slow her down. Aelin vanished from his world without a whisper, and there it was, pine and snow. And basically, pine and snow is how she recognizes Rowan's scent, so that means that she is coming up on Rowan. So she grabs this tether that Rowan left out for her, and sure enough, she wakes up in her body. She sees that Kale and Dorian had been crying, and Rowan was obviously like writhing in pain from what felt like the mating bond being severed. And honestly, they're all looking at her with a look of shock, like, how are you here? How are you alive? Like, what's happening? And she tells them everything that went down and everything that she did. But she then goes to summon her power, and she produces a tiny flame, the last of her power. All she has left is an ember of her fire magic from Mala and a droplet of her water magic from her mother. Also, she has lost her ability to shift into a human form, so she is now just purely Fae, an ordinary gift, a firebringer no more, but Aelin all the same. Chapter 100, let's start off this part in Adian's POV as he is waking up and suiting for battle, and we learn that it has been a week since the 13's sacrifice. Okay, so it's been a whole week since we've really heard from them last. So he suits up and then he goes to Lysandra's rooms to pick her up, and they go down to eat breakfast before battle together. And we learn that this has become a daily ritual for them. We jump to Manon's POV because we learn that she has basically been distracting herself by not sleeping and literally nonstop planning and being a witch queen and witch leader to all the Crocians and her iron teeth. Her and Petra are still alive, and then we learn that there's just the blue blood grandmother, so Petra's matron grandmother, is the only other like big well-known iron teeth witch fighting for Erewhon's side still that we're aware of. So on this morning at breakfast, Ansel comes to sit by Manon and basically, says like, once again, I'm really sorry about what happened with the 13, and then tells her that when the war is done, as like a thank you to them, they will get the old witch kingdom back, like the old borders, and they will share the wastes. And in this moment, it's bittersweet because the witches don't want to share the wastes. Like, the waste is theirs, but also at the same time, like, they've been gone for, a century at this point, or even more, and Ansel and her family and her people, like, they liberated the waste and they moved into the waste and they've made it their home. So it's just kind of like, yeah, like that's just the nature of things. We're going to have to share it now with these humans. Now we're going to get another Evangeline POV. We don't get many of these, but whenever we do, I absolutely love them. She delivers a message from a Croatian witch to Darrow saying that there is a siege tower rolling in and it's going to be here in about 2 hours. And in this moment, Murtaugh, whoever hears this, okay, sweet old Murtaugh, Ren's grandfather, okay, he decides that he is done sitting off to the side with the other lords and watching the battle from a distance, and he is going to fight with Adian in the front lines, despite the old man that he is. Darrow calls him an old fool as he walks out, but Evangeline in this moment thinks if she'd been able to choose a grandfather for herself, it would have been him. I love Murtaugh. Chapter 101, we're actually going to go back to Aylin's POV as she is getting used to this new version of herself, much less powerful and now fully fae. Her and Rowan and Kale and Dorian go back to the camp and tell everyone about what went down, and understandably and arguably rightfully so, they are so mad at Aylin because Aylin went in there planning to throw away their chances of having Erewhon banned. Like, she planned to go into there to bargain and offer for Elena's eternity. And they're like, you lied to us and you screwed everything up. So, like, rightfully so, they're all very, very mad at her. Now, I am not glossing over the positives, okay? Aylin is alive. The word stones and word gates no longer exist, which means that Mantix and Orcus, the 2 other Valg kings, cannot join Erewhon, okay? And Erewhon and Maeve can no longer create additional Valg horrors, okay? They're limited to what they've got right now. Aylin still does have a semblance of magic, which could potentially be helpful. And Dorian may have actually sacrificed a good bit of his raw magic at the very beginning when he was first there, but he still has a lot of strong raw magic, so it's not like we're completely powerless here. Later, however, Aylin and Alid are taking baths and get to talking, and Alid asks more about the changes to Aylin's power and what it feels like. The biggest thing to note is that Aylin, for the first time in her life, can feel the bottom of her well. Remember, we've talked about them having batteries and their power being described as wells. Well, Aylin says that she can actually, like, very quickly, easily, and tangibly feel the bottom of her well. And it's weird, but, you know, like, at least she has a well of power to delve into. Alid then, in this moment, so sweet, offers Silba's ring. Now, I'll remind you, this is the ring that protects you from Valg influence. Aylin is very, very hesitant to take it and even refuses a couple times, but Alid insists. She's like, I need you to have it. I want you to have it. You're going to be on the battlefield. I'm going to be with the healers. Like, you should have Silba's ring. Eventually, Aylin does in fact take Silba's ring, and then they're interrupted by Bort. Okay, so Bort requests to lead Aylin's flank when they get to Orinth. And Aylin's like, honestly, didn't think I'd be alive today, so haven't really thought that far. I don't really have plans for my flank, but we don't get to see the moment that she decides this, but she does decide at some point, yes, Bort is going to lead the aerial portion of her flank. So basically, Bort and a couple other Ruck Riders that Bort is going to lead are going to protect Aylin from above, because if you think about it, the second the Queen of Terrasen gets onto the battlefield, she's going to be target number 1, okay? Like, everyone and their mother on that battlefield is going to be gunning it for Aylin. And so naturally, with like Iron Teeth Witches and stuff being in the sky, Bort is like, let me lead the aerial legion that will protect you in the skies above you. So I think that's pretty sweet. Flash forward, we're pushing through. We actually get to the border of Terrasen and we cross into Terrasen, which is all great and fine and dandy, but now we need to get all the way north because Orinth is all the way north of Terrasen. So we still have to get through basically the entirety of Terrasen. However, a horrible, horrible snowstorm blows in, and it's the kind of snowstorm that they cannot trudge through. Like, they have to set up camp. But we don't have time for this. Chapter 102, this is in Lysandra's POV at the end of the day after fighting all day, and she is at Murtaugh's wake. He fought very bravely, but unfortunately did not last very long. However, we learned that the death of Murtaugh on the battlefield, all the soldiers seeing Murtaugh's fall on the battlefield, enraged them and brought upon this fury like Adian had not seen in a while on this battlefield, and they brought down the siege tower. And can I just say, there's a beautiful lesson to be learned here, I think. Although he did not have the youth and the strength, his sacrifice was still a huge impact. All the other lords are like, oh, well, we're the scholarly ones, or we're here for like the brains and the wisdom. We're not meant to be on the battlefield. But like Murtaugh arguably wasn't meant to be on the battlefield, more so than any of them, right? Because he has age, and he still chose to go out there and fight. And you know what? Like, he didn't really make much of a difference on that battlefield. I can guarantee it. However, he was an inspiration, and he did a lot for the morale of the men on the battlefield. So, like, yes, although he was not your typical soldier, he still made the biggest difference on the battlefield. So, like I said, beautiful lesson to be learned there. They decide to, give Ren a moment with his grandfather. And when Lysandra gets into the hall with Adian, he just breaks down, like absolute breakdown. Uncontrollably sobbing. He's exhausted. His whole life has been spent towards this battle. There is no hope that Aelin or Dorian is coming, and they're basically just giving everything of themselves until the end, and there's really no light at the end of this tunnel. So Lysandra is just holding Adian and being there for him when she says, "He was a good man, a brave and noble man. So are you. And when this war is over, however it may end, I will still be here with you, whether in this life or the next." Adian. Beautiful. But they kiss in this moment. So I guess you can say everything's been forgiven and they're fine with each other. And however, they're not in private, so they gotta chill, okay? I will say that's not the part here that is crazy to me. What's crazy to me is Lysandra, in her inner monologue in the book, says, and I quote, she refers to herself as his partner, his mate. Okay? So in this moment, Lysandra seems to believe that they are mates. And I wish that this is addressed again in the book, or confirmed, or Adian says something about it, or like something. No. Whether or not she's just like referring to him as her mate because she feels that strongly about him and she knows like he's her one for life and it's more of like a term of endearment, or whether or not they actually have a mating bond, I am not sure, but it's a crazy thing to just say. Anyways, so later that night we're gonna switch to Manon's POV as we're at a war council meeting. I will say, actually, before we get into that meeting, little sidebar, with Manon, she has Bronwyn, which she's the Crocian witch who's always been very vocally against Manon up until obviously like everything that went down with the grandmothers. So Bronwyn is apparently her like Crocian witch representative, and Petra is her Iron Teeth witch representative, and they kind of like rule under her. So it's a little bit of a view into like what Manon's government looks like and how she plans to rule the witches. So thought it would be worth a side note. So back to the meeting, we basically discussed that we have 3 days, maybe 4 days worth left of arrows, and then there's a month's worth left of food. The fire lances are most likely going to be used up and useless by tomorrow, and even then they might not make it to the end of the day. There wasn't anything else to discuss. Within a few days, they'd all be a grand feast for the cows. The crows. Not cows. I was like, cows? I knew that didn't sound right. A grand feast for the crows. My bad. Chapter 103. This is in Rowan's POV. As they've all stopped because, like I said, that snowstorm is really, really bad, and we're still a week's journey away from Orinth. Him and Aelin are in their tent when they hear a scout yelling for Aelin. And so she steps out of the tent, and then Rowan just sees her running, and he's like a little confused at first. Rowan saw at last what she beheld, who emerged between the trees, the Lord of the North. Okay, remember, this is the stag. Big deal. Big deal. Last time she saw the stag was in Assassin's Blade on her way to Endovir, right? And at his feet, all around him, the little folk. The creature nearest curled its hand, beckoning, as if to say, "Follow us." The others gaped in silence at the magnificent, proud stag who had come to greet them, to guide home the Queen of Terrasen. When the wind began to whisper, and it was not the song that Rowan usually heard. No, it was a voice that they all heard as it streamed past them. "Doom is upon Orinth, heir of Brannon. You must hurry. We will show you the way, swift and unseen. You have given much yourself, heir of Brannon. We who remember him know he would have made such a choice, had he been able to do so. Oakwald shall never forget Brannon or his heir. So basically, we have a ticket to Orinth. The Lord of the North, this stag, most likely from the Little Folk, heard about what Aelin did to the gods and what she offered Elena and how basically they lost out on everything. And in this moment, he is going to show her and the whole Cognate army and all these people marching through that there is a magical, unseen path to Orinth through the Oakwald Forest that has not been revealed to the Fae. And he is going to escort them personally to Orinth. So we're going to get there now in under a week, okay? So obviously the entirety of the camp starts packing up in a frenzy. And then also because we're going through Oakwald Forest, the snow is going to be less severe because, we're protected by the cover of the tree. So this is perfect. Also, now we don't have to worry about going through Parenth because we would have had to go right next to Parenth in order to get to Orinth unless we went out of the way, which we don't have time to do. And we believe that there are a lot of Veld creatures who camped out there after the rest of the army moved towards Orinth. So, we didn't want to mess around with that. Now we don't have to. However, Aelin decides that there's something that she and Rowan need to do first while everyone's packing up camp. But Aelin dragged Rowan into their tent to the pile of books Cale and Yrene had brought from the southern continent. She ran a finger over the titles, searching and scanning. "What are you doing?" her mate asked. Aelin ignored the question and hummed as she found the book she sought. She leafed through it, careful not to tear the ancient pages. "A stupid cow I might be," she muttered, rotating the book to show Rowan the page she sought, "but not without options." Rowan's eyes danced. "You're including me in this particular scheme, Princess?" Aelin smirked. "I wouldn't want you to feel left out." He angled his head. "We need to hurry then." Listening to the ruckus of the readying army beyond their tent, Aelin nodded and began. Okay, so Rowan and Aelin have a little scheme, okay? Something they thought up based off of what they saw in the books that Yrene and Cale brought from the southern continent. So not entirely useless, okay? I know some people were so mad because they're like, what do you mean, in Tower of Dawn, everything? Obviously, not only for the Cognate army, but so much was done just to get all those scrolls and books just for them to have nothing useful in them. Well, we learned that there is something useful in them in this moment. I actually take this moment as an ode to Sam. This is the first moment since Sam that Aelin has included someone truly in her plans. Obviously, with plans like with Lysandra becoming the Sea Dragon, she needed to reveal those plans to Lysandra because they used Lysandra. She was useful. She was the Sea Dragon. However, we have not seen Aelin include someone in her plans to this extent since the night of Sam's death. So that's something to pay attention to, when you do reread the series, is how secretive Aelin is, and you see that starts when Sam dies, which is great. Aelin is healing. Chapter 104, this is in Adian's POV, as it has been 5 days. In that War Council meeting, they thought we would max make it 4. That was what was kind of agreed upon by everyone. However, we're on day 5, and let's just say things are looking grim. Okay, very, very not good. But the people of Orinth never stopped fighting with every single thing that they have. So day 5 ends. We managed to stretch the arrows out until today. We also somehow managed to stretch out the fire lances till today. So they must have really used them only for dire circumstances. And basically now all we have is our swords. Now let's get Evangeline's POV as she hears someone tell Darrow that tomorrow is going to be their last day. Evangeline knows that this means they're going to be defeated tomorrow. There's not even a possibility that the battle's going to end tomorrow because we win. She's we're pretty much just playing defense at this point. So yeah, we're not going to make it. It really just comes down to, at this point, how hard are we going to make it for Erewhon to defeat us? So Evangeline asks Darrow what happens, and he says, well, me and the other lords will have to decide if we're going to surrender to Erewhon and become slaves to Erewhon, or if we're going to fight until the very last man and die protecting our home. In this moment, he asks Evangeline, he's like, what would you do? To which she tells Darrow about the life that she was meant to live as a courtesan and how Lysandra saved her from that, and how Lysandra always told her about what their life could look like in Caraver, and about what living in Caraver would have meant to her as Lysandra's ward, and what Terrasen represented to her, which was a home and a safe space and a place where she wouldn't have to be a slave. So for that reason, she thinks they should fight to the last man. And let's just say this does something to Darrow in this moment. This breaks open a part of him. So he takes Evangeline and he goes down to where everyone usually eats breakfast, and he finds Adian and Lysandra And he turns to Aedion and he returns the sword of Orinth to him. That alone is a big deal. But then he turns to Lysandra and tells her that he officially recognizes her as the Lady of Caraver and it is officially her home. And he will recognize any and all of Lysandra's future heirs as lords and ladies of Caraver as well. And Lysandra corrects him and she's like, well, Evangeline will be my heir even though she's not my blood. But Darrow says, actually, I have other plans for Evangeline. Would you make an exception for Evangeline to be my heir of my territory? Now, I will say he is the big dog in Terrasen, okay? So if you want any inheritance, obviously, other than becoming the king or queen of Terrasen, like, you want to be the heir of Darrow's, okay? So Evangeline is literally going to be set for life, inheriting Darrow's lordship or ladyship. And Lysandra realizes how big this is, and she's like, okay, well, it's Evangeline's choice. And Evangeline in this moment is like, yeah, I'm accepting that. Now, that's a sweet, happy moment, despite how, like, not sweet and happy this portion of the book is. But we do get a man in POV, which is, very depressing. She's sitting with Abraxos, also realizing, today's going to be the last day of this battle. And she realizes now that if Dorian hasn't made it, it's because he failed. And she's not going to get to see Dorian again. And that makes her sad. And then she also thinks about the fact that she will never get to see the wastes. Ever. And that makes her even sadder. As if she needs anything else to be more sad about. She's going through the ringer right now. Chapter 105, this is in Lysandra's POV as this last day of battle has officially kicked off. Lysandra is horrified because she realizes in this moment that Morath has actually been holding back this entire time. And now they're officially fighting with full force. And Lysandra realizes, like, they might not even make it to the end of the day. We get Manon's POV as she's fighting from the skies. Things are not going well. She even eventually has to blow this horn, basically signaling all of the Crocians as well as the Iron Teeth on their side to kind of like fall back closer to the mountains and try to regroup so that they, can condense and have a better chance of fighting. But it's basically like accepting a little bit of a defeat by falling back in this way. We also get Aedion's POV as a bunch of siege ladders have now breached the walls and some more siege towers are rolling up. And he's guessing that they only have a couple hours left. Very, very grim looking. Lysandra in this moment, however, shifts into her human form and gets to Aedion and informs him that the western gate is about to go down. Now, these are the gates into Orinth. With the siege towers and ladders, it's easier to break those down because they're ladders and towers, and you can like tell where someone's gonna funnel in. However, if one of these gates gets torn down, it's like, we're opening the walls into the city. And once that gate opens and Valg start flooding into it, like, none of the civilians in Orinth are safe. And also, like, it's pretty much game over because they've made it in, they've infiltrated. There's no such thing as like another day of battle at that point. Like, that's where it ends, really. So the western gate is about to fall to the Valg foot soldiers. So they decide that they're going to go down together to protect it, and they vow to find each other in the next life because they're not going to survive protecting the western wall. That's just basically, that's just a fact at this point. So they're making their way to the western gate together when they hear a horn. And so they look over in the distance and it says, and then they appeared along the edge of the foothills, a line of golden armored warriors, foot soldiers, and cavalry alike. More and more and more, a great line spreading across the crest of the final hill, filling the skies, stretching into the horizon, flew mighty armored birds with riders, rucks, and before them all, sword raised to the sky as that horn blew one last time, the ruby in the blade's pommel smoldering like a small sun. Before them all, riding on the Lord of the North, was Aelin. Guys, Aelin is riding into battle on the great stag, the Lord of the North. I can't even begin to imagine how like majestic of a sight this is. Chapter 106, this is Aelin's POV as she is looking at Orinth for the first time since the night of her attempted assassination like 10 plus years ago. And mind you, she stepped foot in Terrasen, but she was banned from going to Orinth, so she has not made it this far to like her kingdom, right? So they quickly assess the damage and what needs to be done, and Aelin can see in this moment all of the allies who came to protect Terrasen. It's a really emotional moment for her. She's like, oh my word, like they all came. And like, this is everything she could have hoped and dreamed for. And then she leads the charge and her army just tears into the side of this Valg army. Chapter 107, we get Rowan's POV as he is fighting, and here's his goal. He's going to liberate the city from those who've breached the walls, and then they're going to regroup and restock before Erewhon and Maeve get here. So they're basically just trying to cause as much chaos and give as much pushback as possible so that Morath will back off, at least for a little bit. And we know Maeve and Erewhon are coming because the second Aelin made an appearance, like, let's be so for real, they are not going to be very far behind. There's also this really sweet moment here where he is fighting alongside Fenris and Lorcan. Gavriel is elsewhere, we'll get to that later. But Rowan realizes, like, he has fought with these men before in hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of battles, but never with this ferocity, because before they just followed orders, right? But this time, for the first time, they have something worth fighting for, and they actually want to be a part of this fight. Like, before it was like, Maeve was like, fight this battle, and they were like, okay, like, they didn't really have thoughts about it, like, it was just kind of what they were supposed to do. But this, like, they're fighting for something. They're fighting for their home. They're fighting for this better world that they believe in, for a queen who actually cares about them. Well, now we're going to jump to Aedian's POV as he is seeing Dorian is fighting. He's seeing that Aelin's alive. He's seeing that Chaol looks like he was able to get feeling in his back again because he's on horseback. And on top of that, he got the entire Southern Continent army, at least from what it looks like an entire army, to come and also help in the war. Lysandra actually is no longer going down to the Western Gate with Aedian because once she saw the Rux and how they were giving, obviously, all the Iron Teeth in the skies a run for their money, she took advantage of that and she shifted into her wyvern form and decided to help do some more damage from the skies with them. So with this newfound hope, Aedian and a bunch of the other soldiers now are making their way to the Western Gate to protect it. We jump back to Aelin's POV as she is fighting, and at one point she gets into a bit of a pickle with a wyvern that's diving for her, and Bort is distracted by some Iron Teeth witches, because remember, Bort's protecting her from the skies, and let's just say the wyvern's diving for her. It's a really creepy moment. However, none other than Lysandra in wyvern form just plows through that other wyvern, okay, and saves Aelin's butt. And then she lands and she transfers back into her human body. They embrace. It's sweet, the bestest of friends, and like the ideal female friendship duo in fantasy ever. They have this little reunion and it's really sweet. However, this reunion is very quickly interrupted by horns signaling that 3 siege towers now, okay, are making their way to the southern gate. Okay, so Aedian's at the western gate. This is now happening at the southern gate, so different areas. So Aelin and Lysandra look at each other and they're like, oh yeah, we got this. So they start to head over there together. We go back to Rowan's POV as he's pretty uncomfortable with how much distance is between him and Aelin right now, but he can see in the distance as her and Lysandra and Ansel are plowing through Valg foot soldiers on these siege towers. He watches it as they make it all the way up to the top of the siege towers, hop on top of Orinth's walls, and then using the catapults that were up there, remember the catapults we used like at the very beginning of the battle at Orinth, and just like Sam did, okay? Guys, remember Sam in Assassin's Blade using the catapult? Just like Sam did, Aelin turns around one of these catapults and uses it to destroy one of the siege towers. Ansel follows suit and uses it to destroy a second siege tower, and then Lysandra shifts into a wyvern form, pulls like the top mechanism off the catapult, and like as if it were a baseball bat, swings it into the third siege tower. So these 3 girls just completely demolished all 3 siege towers. I'm so proud. Then we jump to Nesrin's POV, okay? And she is in the skies, and then she sees something terrifying, and she points it out to Sartok. Nesrin pointed behind them to the secondary dark host creeping at their backs, right from Parenth, where they had no doubt been hidden, the rest of Morath's host. Okay, guys, so this wasn't even all of it. Like I said earlier, we had a suspicion, like maybe some people stayed back in Parenth. Yep, that's the case. And then also the rest of Morath's host is here as well. So what we're fighting in this moment wasn't even all of it. So happy feelings gone, okay? Iron Teeth witches and wyverns were with them. This battle had been a trap to lure them here to expend their forces defeating this army, while the rest snuck behind and trapped them against Orinth's walls. Man, this took a dark turn very, very fast, but there's over 100+ pages left at this point. So obviously still a lot of room for stuff to go wrong. Now we're going to jump to Adian's POV real quick as the Western Gate does in fact fall, and now it's just a matter of trying to keep these Valg soldiers from like breaching it. So they were able to get it down, but they're still trying to protect it to keep any from getting in. And then he hears about the second army that's coming, and he's like, okay, we need to either block this gate or reseal it or reclose the gate or something ASAP before the second army gets here. However, a wyvern just comes hurtling down from the skies, perfectly and beautifully, pristinely falls right in front of the gate, completely covering it. And this wyvern is dead, so it's just like its body, right? And who jumps off the wyvern other than Gavriel? Somehow Gavriel got into the skies, killed a witch on a wyvern, and then steered that wyvern to its death in front of the gate to protect it. But he did all that because his son had a mission, and he is here to help. Chapter 108, this is Adian's POV as he is protecting the Western Gate with not only the Bane, but also his father. Gavriel also uses these couple moments while they are fighting to inform Adian that Aelin did in fact seal the gate, however, Erewhon is not banished. Adian's a little confused, but also recognizes now is not the time to ask questions. He'll get some answers later. For now, Adian's number one concern is shutting this gate. Then we shut them, Gavriel said, and smiled grimly. Together. The word was more of a question, subtle and sorrowful. Together as father and son, and the two warriors that they were. Gavriel, his father, he had come. And looking into those tawny eyes, Adian knew it was not for Aelin or for Terrasen that his father had done it. Together, Adian rasped. Not just this obstacle, not just this battle, but whatever would come afterward, should they survive. Together. So Adian in this moment is finally telling Gavriel, like, I accept you as my father. I want a relationship with you, like father-son. And it's really beautiful. However, they get into formation to fight off these Valg and seal the gate when Adian realizes his father isn't beside him in the formation like he thought. He's in front of where the gate is that needs to be closed so that he can keep the soldiers at bay himself so that Adian and the Bane can close the gate. So Gavriel is sacrificing. Okay, I don't want to cry. I can't cry. Liquid eyeliner. You get it. Gavriel wasn't saying like, do you accept me, father and son, so we can fight this together? It was like I want to know before I die that like you accepted me. Like this is what I lived for. And now that I know that you accept me as your father, like I can die a happy man. And okay, yeah, that's hard to read. So Gavriel's out there fighting, and sure enough, like they do seal the gate. They do it as fast as humanly possible, and then Adian runs back up the walls in hopes to like maybe find a siege ladder or a siege tower to climb down to get to his father, and he does, but by the time he gets there, Gavriel is dead. So Gavriel did not make it, but you can see surrounding him is like hundreds of Valg foot soldiers. He went down swinging. Now, Rowan's POV, as from the distance, he can see that the Western Gate is sealed, and all he can think of is, awesome, Adian was able to do it. And he's relieved. And he doesn't know in this moment what that means. However, after the Western Gate is sealed, everyone is called to go to Orynth's walls because we're guessing we have about an hour before this second army gets to the walls. So in this moment, Rowan's like, okay, I have 1 hour to find Aelin and make sure that we can solidify our plans. And so he's running to Orynth's walls, and that is when he sees Gavriel's body, and he realizes what it took to seal the Western Gate. So in this moment, he picks up Gavriel and takes him into Orynth. He has to pass off Gavriel's body because he's quickly met by a messenger who says, we have an estimate for the oncoming army, 20,000 at minimum. Their ranks are filled with Valg and 6 Katankui, which we can assume are the Valg princesses that Maeve and Erewhon were making while Dorian was in Morath. On top of that, we learn that at some point, Rowan was shot with an iron bow and arrow. He ripped the arrow out of him, but the iron tip of it got stuck in his arm, and he didn't have time to like fish it out of his muscles, while he was on the battlefield. But he has supernatural fey healing, and so it healed over, and so this iron is now stuck lodged in his arm. And I will remind you that iron can keep you from performing a lot of your magic, or at least like really stifle and dampen your power. So he cannot shift, but he needs to find Aelin ASAP. But shifting into his bird form to find Aelin is no longer an option for him. Chapter 109, this is in Kale's POV as he is losing mobility fast because of the intensive healing work that Yrene is doing since the second they got there. However, night is falling and Kale does not think that the second army is going to wait until the sun comes up. He thinks they're most likely going to strike the second they get here and that this battle is going to go straight into the night. We're going to jump to Aelin's POV as she is watching the Valg foot soldiers run from the walls towards the second army, which is great because it's going to give everyone that hour to kind of regroup and plan. However, the last of those who are fighting for Terrasen are running for Orinth to make it through the southern gate before it is closed. Aelin is on the battlefield with an injured Ansel, and so she gets Ansel onto a horse with another one of Terrasen's men and has them run for the gate. But we realize in this moment that Aelin herself is not running back to Orinth. Aelin actually is staying behind on the battlefield, alone, facing the second army as it marches towards her and her alone. We're going to jump to Yrene's POV. I know that's crazy, and I hate how Sarah J. Maas always will leave us on a crazy cliffhanger and then jump to another POV. But we're going to jump to Yrene's for a second as she's taking a short break from healing to look out on the battlefield and see the absolute horrificness of this second army that is coming towards us and the cloud of darkness that is following this army. Obviously, like, night is falling right now, but we learned that there's literally like a magical cloud that is like serving to kind of disguise and hide. That's why the messenger told Rowan there was an estimate on the number. There's like this black cloud that's hiding a really big portion of this army. And then she watches as Maeve and Erewhon walk out in front of this army, and they're in the front lines. And then she sees who they're walking toward to meet. It is none other than Aelin, alone on the battlefield in front of Orinth, holding a blade and shield of fire. It's kind of epic if you ask me. Epic but terrifying. Chapter 110, this is Aelin's POV as she is facing Maeve and Erewhon. The magic in her veins was little more than a sputtering ember, but they did not know that. So you're probably like, girl, what's your plan here? It is to distract them as much as humanly possible. Basically, she realizes she just needs to give the people of Terrasen time to evacuate, and so she's trying to give them as much time as humanly possible. So in this moment, she has her, sword of fire, she has her shield of fire, and then she summons a crown of flames on top of her head. Like I said, sounds very majestic, right? She does not plan to survive this. I mean, when does she plan to survive anything, it seems these days? But she decides, like, she only has an ember of her magic, right? And it's kind of sputtering out. And, if she can take down at least one of them, she's gonna do her best. Maeve, off the bat, doesn't want to delay anything, and she's like, I see this for what it is, you're stalling, let's attack. However, Erewhon is down to chat with Aelin. So Aelin just brings up off the bat that she sealed the word gate and she destroyed the keys. Erewhon knows this, but wants to know how she did it, and she tells them about how she banished the gods and how she's even alive right now. So she's telling them the whole story, guys. She's trying to make up time, okay? She needs time. Obviously, she left out the part about losing all of her magic, clearly. Maeve is like, all right, enough, like, let's just kill her and move on. But Aelin, in this moment, is like, shoot, I need to bring up something else. She knows exactly what topic is going to keep Erewhon's interest. So she's like, so are you guys going to be sharing power now that you're both stuck in this world together? And if that's the case, what is Maeve going to do with her army of healers? And Erewhon's like, her what now? So Aelin can see that she is planting a seed of doubt, and she decides to run with this because she's like, okay, clearly, like, Maeve isn't just siding with Erewhon. Like, Maeve never does anything that isn't only to benefit her. Like, clearly she's playing Erewhon here, so I just need to make Erewhon see that he's being played right now and cause some doubt between the two of them. So Aelin decides to bring it home by dropping some information that she knows Erewhon is going to be very surprised by, which is that Aelin was held in captivity 4 months by Maeve. And then she reveals everything that Dorian told her happened in Morath about how Maeve was helping Dorian and helped him get the third word key, basically distracted Erewhon so that he could make Morath crumble. To add insult to injury, as if Erewhon wasn't already like really, really doubting Maeve in this moment, Aelin mentions that maybe Maeve also forgot to mention that I have an entire army of healers behind the walls of Orinth from the tour in the southern continent. But Maeve already knew that. And Erewhon didn't, because Maeve didn't feel like it was necessary to tell him. And Aylin's like, is it possible that Maeve was hoping that you would kind of walk in here blind and then you would, run into these healers and, see what happens? Erewhon turns to Maeve in this moment to be like, is all of this true? And Aylin decides to use this as an opportunity to unleash like what little fire magic she does have at them. So we're going to jump to Yreen's POV as she's watching from a distance, and this kind of like sparked battle to commence. Okay, things start off again. It's ugly, and despite all the fighting, she can see like darkness and fire shooting back and forth where Aylin met Maeve and Erewhon. However, in this moment, she can tell that Aylin is just deflecting and using defensive moves rather than attacking, and is wondering how long it's going to take for Maeve and Erewhon to figure that out. Aylin did nothing without reason, had gone out there to buy them time, to wear the Valg rulers down just a bit, but Aylin could not defeat them. There was only one person who could. The queen would never ask that of them, of Yreen, but she might leave a path open should Yreen wish to take either. She saw what they had to do. Chapter 111, we get a short Nesrin POV from the skies as she is fighting not only the Iron Teeth, but also now Iron Teeth and Ilkin, and it's a total nightmare. Then we get Yreen's POV again as she hitches a ride on Lysandra in wreck form to where Dorian and Kale are fighting, and then Kale freaks out when he sees her on the battlefield at first, telling her like she needs to get behind the walls ASAP, but she reveals that she's actually here for Dorian. And Kale in this moment realizes what Yreen is going to attempt to do. And for the first time in his life, he gives Dorian an order: keep her safe. Now let's jump to Lorcan's POV. It's been a hot minute since we've had a Lorcan POV. We learned that Rowan has fished the iron out of his arm, and he and Fenris and Lorcan have been fighting to protect Orinth from the Valgs at the front walls. Rowan did want to go to Aylin at first after seeing her like meet Erewhon and Maeve at the front lines, but he also did realize that she was doing it to stall, and the best thing that him and the cadre could do for her in that moment and what she would want them to do is to defend the walls a little bit longer. However, Lorcan feels a shift, and he knows that Rowan and Fenris can feel it too, because something's happening here. It's almost as if they've been signaled or summoned by the Blood Oath. Interesting. So they all start making their way to Aylin. We get Aylin's POV again as she is sparring with both Erewhon and Maeve when Erewhon pauses because he senses a pulse of power from behind the walls of Orinth, and it is healing magic, very strong healing magic. And he realizes in this moment that he cannot trust Maeve. And then in this really weird moment, he like summons an Ilkin, and an Ilkin picks him up and flies him towards the walls of Orinth, leaving just Maeve and Aylin together, to which Maeve's response is, just us then, but I know your secret, Heir of Fire. Uh-oh. Chapter 112 in Yreen's POV as she is sending a beam of her healing power in the direction of Erewhon. So this was intentional. That pulsating magic that he felt, that healing magic he felt, that was coming directly from Yreen. So she's watching as an Ilkin swoops him up and brings him over to where she is. And what happens there is crazy, but we're going to jump back to Aylin's POV as she's fighting Maeve and realizes like, oh shoot, Maeve realizes that I have no magic. And if you at this point were like, okay, like she has no magic, but like how is the shield glowing and the sword glowing with fire? We basically learned that Aylin imbued them with her magic before she went to seal the word gate as a precaution. So that's something that really cool that her and Rowan did together. So Maeve starts, shooting her freaky Valg shadow magic at Aylin over and over and over again. And then something really weird happens. Aylin wakes up, okay? Like she was asleep. And she wakes up in the iron coffin back in Karen's rooms as if it was all just one big dream, and she never left Dornell. Aylin thinks for sure this is a mind game, but she very quickly actually begins to doubt herself. She doesn't know what's real and what's not. However, Karen shows up and makes a comment about how he is breaking her. And this cues something in Aylin's brain. Broken. Cannot be broken. Alentia. Nehemia gave Aylin another name before her death, right? She named her Alentia. For when her other names were too much of a burden to bear, she could go by Alentia. What does Alentia mean? Cannot be broken. And this is the thing that makes Aylin realize in this moment that this is actually a dream. And don't worry, it's not like these last 300-400 pages have all been like one giant hallucination. That would have been crazy. She realizes in this moment that this is the hallucination that Maeve wants her to think, that she never made it this far. So Aelin in this moment breaks out of the iron coffin because it's a dream. So she decides that she's gonna like take control of the dream. And so she fights back and she starts fighting Maeve with her fire in this dream. However, she falters because she sees a lead and she sees Maeve go to shoot magic at a lead, and she goes to jump and protect a lead. However, a lead's not there because it's a vision, it's fake, it's not real. And in jumping in front of a lead's body, Aelin like puts herself in the line of fire, or in the line of shadows, I guess, in this scenario, and she starts getting choked by these like Valg shadows that Maeve has. In doing so and losing oxygen, it kind of melts away the illusion. So we're back on the battlefield in front of the walls of Orinth, and Aelin is getting her oxygen cut off when Lorcan and Fenris and Rowan swoop in. Rowan uses his wind magic to give Aelin back her oxygen, and Fenris goes to attack Maeve in his wolf form, but she, takes all her attention off of Aelin for a second and whips it at Fenris. And we learn in this moment that it's not really discussed again for the rest of the book, so I don't really think it's that relevant, but we basically learn that she like distorts his face, like with a gash that just like he's never gonna look the same. Fun fact, we also learn that he never magically gets it healed. He just leaves it like that. I'm guessing is like a reminder for, what happens today here at the battlefield. Yeah, little side note, she completely disfigures Fenris's face and he doesn't have it healed. He just lets it be that way. Then Maeve summons this like tornado of darkness, if you will, this entire cloud that she puts over Rowan, Fenris, and Lorcan, all three of the cadre. And then Aelin can hear, not Lorcan actually stays quiet, but she can hear Rowan and Fenris just start screaming in pain. Chapter 113, let's go back to Yreen's POV to learn what happens when Erewhon shows up. So Erewhon lands in this moment and tells Yreen, like, I don't want to hurt you, I want to use you, okay? So he has this crazy idea. So the original Valg world that Maeve was like running from and escaping from, that the Valg Kings came from, well, apparently in order to create the word keys and in turn the word gate, they basically gathered all of their world's equivalent to healers in this world and sacrificed all of them in order to make and create these keys and the gates. However, Yreen herself alone is just as powerful as all of them were combined, so he wants to use Yreen to reopen the gates and create new keys. So he goes to like lunge for her, but then he stops dead in his tracks. Not because of anything of his own will, but because he stepped right over word marks that Dorian had put in the ground. Kind of like the ones that were used in Crown of Midnight to entrap that one creature when Aelin and Dorian like entrapped that one creature that was underneath the castle, right? And then he watches in horror as Yreen shifts, and she's not Yreen at all, actually. She is none other than Dorian. Then Lysandra swoops down in a ruck form and drops Yreen, who she'd been holding right next to Erewhon, and Yreen just throws her healing magic into him. Then Dorian also throws healing magic into him, and then a lead walks up holding Damaris, okay, the Sword of Truth, and just shoves it into Erewhon's gut. So he's got Damaris sticking out of him. And then Lysandra shifts into her snow leopard form and she like pins him down so that Yreen and Dorian can keep throwing their magic into him. However, something even crazier happens in this moment. I read these books 3 times before I realized this. Dorian cuts his palm, then takes Yreen's hand and cuts her palm, and they join hands. And then it says Yreen turns to starlight. Call me crazy. To me, this is telling us that Yreen and Dorian are Karanom. That is how Aelin and Rowan have always tapped into their Karanom power. They've cut their palms, they've joined hands. If you think about it, they do have balance of power. They're both very, very powerful. It would also be crazy full circle after Dorian's history with Sorsha and how he was drawn to her and her healing magic and who she was as a healer. Or not her healing magic, but her healing abilities. And then also, I really do like that we get to see Karanom manifested in a non-romantic relationship. That alone is cool. So, I would argue, okay, this has not been confirmed by Sarah J. Maas, but to me, I'm like 95% sure. Like, it doesn't say outright. This is me reading between the lines. It seems like Sarah J. Maas is spelling out for us that like Dorian and Yrene just completed a Karanom bond, and they're using that to defeat Erewhon in this moment. Anyway, so we're gonna jump to Dorian's POV as he is letting his power flow into Yrene and charge her magic battery. Does this not sound like Karanom? And Dorian in this moment realizes he has moments before Yrene is successful in killing Erewhon, but he decides he has one question he just needs to ask. What was my father's name? Now, Erewhon does not fess up right away, but something crazy happens here. Dorian goes to grab Damaris, which is still like in Erewhon's gut, and goes to twist it, right? To be like, no, you're gonna tell me my father's name before I kill you. And we learn in this moment that Damaris has a whole nother aspect of its power that we didn't even know of. The Sword of Truth. I guess when Damaris is actively in a person, you can demand the truth from them. It's like a walking truth serum as a sword. So with the sword Damaris in Erewhon's gut, and Dorian holding on to it, the truth is literally pulled from Erewhon in this moment. Erewhon admits that although he had a very strong hold on the King of Adarlan, the King of Adarlan remembered his name only once, when Dorian was born, and as an act of defiance against Erewhon, he named the child after himself. Guys, the King of Adarlan's name was Dorian. And just like how Dorian only remembered his name when he was under the Valg influence by seeing people that he loved and cared about, his father only ever remembered his name when he saw his son as a baby, also proving that he loved Dorian more than anything or anyone. And Dorian was his most prized possession, and the only time he remembered his own name. In a moment of strength against Erewhon, named Dorian after himself. I love that so much it makes me want to vomit. I feel like Sarah J. Maas was like writing this book and she got to this part and she was like, how could I traumatize everyone just slightly bit more? That's how she does it. And then Dorian yields his magic to Yrene. Yrene shoots everything that she has into Erewhon and sure enough kills Erewhon. Then Dorian goes to shoot fire magic at Erewhon to kind of disintegrate the body, but it's not necessary because Erewhon's body turns to ash immediately and just kind of dissolves and blows away in the wind. And so Erewhon is dead and defeated. Let's jump to chapter 114 though, because we still have Maeve to worry about. We're in Rowan's POV as he is staring at Aylin's dead body, and then he is met by Lyria, who is hurt that he chose Aylin over her. We then get Fenris's POV as he is facing his twin brother Connell, who's basically saying everything that happened to me is your fault. And then we get Lorcan's POV as he is confessing to Elide that he thinks they are mates, but Elide wants nothing to do with him and keeps rejecting the mating bond. We get in Aylin's POV, so in an effort to get Maeve to like kind of weaken her grip on the cadre, Aylin throws Guldrun, her sword. She throws the whole sword at Maeve and misses. Maeve dives out of the way just in time. However, we learn that Aylin wasn't necessarily trying to strike true. She didn't think that would work. She just needed Maeve to, release her claws for just a second. And in this moment, what she refers to as her last bit of fire magic, so this is like all she's got left, she shoots it at the three cadre and burns the side of all three of them. We then get like quick side-by-sides of all three of their POVs as they feel this burn from Aylin. It snaps them out of reality. I will say it only snaps Rowan and Lorcan out. Fenris is still very much in a trance with Connell. Rowan immediately goes to Aylin's side, cuts their palms, and sure enough joins hands so that he can charge Aylin's battery so that she can still fight Maeve. Light flared at their feet and Maeve's power surged, but too late. The portal opened. So Aylin's not using her magic to summon fire. She's using it to open a portal, exactly as the word marks in the books Chaol and Yrene had brought from the southern continent had promised, precisely to where Aylin had intended, where she had glimpsed as she tumbled back through the word gate, where she and Rowan had ventured days ago testing this very portal. The forest glen was silvered in the moonlight, the snows thick, strange old trees, older than even those in Oakwald, trees that could only be found north of Terrasen in the hinterlands beyond. And then we look at what is an entire army of Fae on wolves. Fae who fled Terrasen. Also, some Fae that fled Doranel in the southern continent during the previous Valg wars. Fae who were alive at the time of Brandon of the Wildfire. Best part about all this? They all hate Maeve. Not just Maeve, but the ones from the southern continent especially hate the Katankui and did not forget that they and some of their ancestors were almost wiped out by the beasts themselves, so they made sure that they knew how how to defeat them if the time ever came, and boy has that time come. And so these ancient fae start pouring out of the portal and joining the war. So when Aelin had that idea and her and Rowan started going through all those books together, Aelin remembered seeing something about how to open portals using word marks. And so they went and practiced and opened a portal to this world, had discussions with these people, and got them to agree to come aid them in this war. And Aelin knew these people existed because when she was falling between all the worlds and observing all the worlds, she saw this one. Crazy, fun, exciting, love it. However, Fenris, I will remind you, is still in Maeve's mental trance. But Maeve's a little distracted by, obviously all these Fae warriors that are pouring out of this portal. And so Aelin, in this moment, orders him, using the blood oath, to look at her. And then she blinks at him 4 times. Remember, 4 blinks means, in their blinky language, means I am here, I am with you. And this is what tethers Fenris back to the real world. And he blinks once in response, which means yes. Aelin takes this as a sign to go back to Rowan. They join hands again, and then her and Rowan step into action and start with fire shooting at Maeve, while Lorcan is using his death magic to shoot at Maeve as well. And she's volleying all these attacks, and she's doing a pretty good job keeping up with them, but nothing could have prepared her for Fenris, who had snapped out of it, grabbed Goldren, the sword that Aelin had thrown just a couple minutes ago that was now behind Maeve. He grabs it and he shish kebabs her right through the back. Chapter 115, Aelin's POV, is Maeve is begging for mercy. And so Aelin just comes up to her and quickly, without her realizing it, takes Silba's ring and slips it onto Maeve's finger. Now, why is this crazy? This is the ring that shields you from Valg influence. So what do you think's gonna happen when Aelin puts it on a Valg creature? Well, it rips Maeve apart from the inside out. Aelin takes Goldren from Fenris, beheads Maeve, just to be safe, of course. And so we have officially been liberated from King Erawan and Queen Maeve, and because there is no longer any Valg overlord, king or queen, in this world, keeping them alive, every single Valg foot soldier, every single Valg creature, the Katankui, as well as all the Ilken, just collapse and crumple. And then the Iron Teeth Witches, who are the only non-Valg creation who are fighting, they all see this happen, and they are out of there, and they flee south. Chapter 116. This is actually in Kale's POV, as he wakes up to Yrene at his bedside. Apparently, the power that she used, or the level of power that she used to kill Erewhon, knocked Kale unconscious. However, shortly after he wakes up, he can hear cheering in the distance. And in this moment, he realizes they won the war. Like, it's over. And then in that moment, he realizes, he's like, oh my word, my queen, my wife, the mother of my child, you did it. Like, you killed Erewhon. And he's just exuding overwhelming pride. Erewhon might have been over, his threat and army with it, and Maeve with it too, but life, Kale realized, life was just beginning. Then we get Nesrin's POV as she's processing everything that just happened. She watched from the sky as the Valg army and all these Valg creatures just collapsed and dissipated and ceased to exist. We also learned from her POV that her Rux, Salki, he was seriously hurt, but a healer did say that he's going to be fine, so Salki will be okay. And then she is met by Sartok and they embrace, and they're just relieved that it's over and they're both alive and safe. And then he reminds her that it is officially time now to go home to the southern continent. And she, in this moment, is so relieved to hear him say that, and she realizes, like, yeah, the southern continent is home to me. And, good thing that it feels like home to her, because she's going to be the empress of it. So I think it's safe to say that Nesrin has a very, very happy ending. Then we get the POV of Aelin as they cadre. Ever the warriors that they are, they stay on the battlefield for hours after the battle is over. So the Valg foot soldiers, they all collapse, but their physical bodies are still there. So they're going around just to make sure all the Valg creatures are actually dead and gone. And then once they're all reassured that the war is officially over, Aelin decides that it is time to do what she's been dying to do for about 11 years now. She turns towards Orinth to go walk towards the gates and uses the slightest bit of flame that she still has left in her to purify the stone walls on the outside. And then Rowan's fingers tightened around hers, but she did not look at him as they crossed the threshold, passing through the gate. Chapter 117, Adian's POV, we learn that he was fighting and fighting and fighting up until the soldier right in front of him had collapsed to the ground, and all he hears is cheering. but he has one thing on his mind. He immediately goes into Orinth and straight to where they had laid his father, Gabriel's body, and stays with him for hours, basically mourning the relationship that they could have had. At some point, Lysandra does join him and she stays with him for a few more hours before they leave, but shortly after they exit the chamber that Gabriel was in, they run into a really strange man that neither of them have seen before, and he's asking for Lysandra, saying that he is her uncle and he's been searching for her for years and he wants to give her everything she could possibly want. And of course, Lysandra, who's wanted nothing more than to have family that loves her and cares about her, is so thrilled, and they embrace and they have this really sweet, tender moment together. And it says, Adian watched silent and ripped open, yet happy for her. He always would be happy for her, for any ray of light she found. Lysandra pulled away from Falcon, though, still smiling bright, more lovely than the night sky above. She laced her fingers with Adian's and squeezed tight as she answered her uncle at last, I already have everything that I need. I love that happy ending. I love that ending for Lysandra so much. Then we get Dorian's POV, and we learn that he actually never left the place where Yrene ended Erewhon. He is close to magical burnout after all, now that his battery is a lot smaller than it was before. And he is just looking at Damaris, the Sword of Truth, which is still in the ground where Erewhon met his end, and he's thinking about how this Sword of Truth revealed his father's name to him and what that means. And then he finally does something that he has been wanting to do for a while now. It is to ask the sword a question to see if it tells him that it is true or not. Or I guess not a question so much as a statement to see if the sword tells him it's true or false. And it's a thing that he has been wrestling with since Crown of Midnight, when he was put on this Valg collar, which is how much of him is what he is because of the Valg influence and being in the collar, and how much of it is actually just who he is as a being, right? So he finally picks up the sword and tells the sword, I am human. And sure enough, it radiates warmth to tell him that is true. Dorian is in fact human. So that does confirm that for us. This also confirms a couple other things, but we'll get to that later. Dorian is relieved by this, and then shortly after, Manon lands on Abraxos, and he's looking around to see where the 13 are, to which she responds, you will not find them in this sky or any other. And then she just reaches for him and embraces him, and they just hold each other, and it's a very tender moment that we don't really get to see with them, hardly ever. And I feel like that alone is its own kind of happy ending for them. The fact that they're in this place together. It's not happy by any means. They have both lost so much and everything, but nobody understands the other person's pain quite like the other in their relationship. We're then going to jump to Aylin's POV for a really sweet and special moment, as the people of Orinth have lined the streets. Okay, and they're holding candles, because I'll remind you, it's nightfall now because the battle went into the night, and they are lining the streets of Orinth, leading all the way up to the castle gates. So she walks as everyone is cheering for her and yelling for her and welcoming her home, and she makes it all the way to the castle gates to Darrow. He asks her why she went to face Maven Erewhon if she has little to no magic, and her only response is, Terrasen is my home. Explanation enough. She's like, I would give my life for this place. And Darrow responds, so it is. Welcome home, your majesty. So he is officially recognizing her by her queenly title. We learn that him and the lords took a vote, and they officially voted in Aylin is the true queen of Terrasen. So Aylin in this moment looks to little sweet Evangeline, who is next to Darrow, and she can tell by this little mischievous look in her eyes that Evangeline played a big part in making Darrow believe that Aylin should be queen. And she remembers back in Queen of Shadows when she left Evangeline and Fleetfoot with Murtaugh. She, in order to get Evangeline comfortable with the idea of being separated from her and Lysandra, she gave Evangeline a mission. Win me back my kingdom, Evangeline. That's all she told her. And Evangeline literally did just that. So Aylin steps into the castle for the first time in years, and she sees Adian, and it says, home at last. Home together. So it's everything her and Adian have fought for, it's finally coming to fruition right here, right now. However, in seeing Adian, she remembers, not that she forgot, but lots happening. She asked to be brought to Gavriel. Adian had brought Gavriel's body to the castle, so Aylin and the cadre go down to see him And Aelin does something very, very interesting here. She speaks to Gavriel's body and basically says, like, I know you wanted to take the blood oath. I wanted Aedion to take it first. But in this moment, she offers Gavriel the blood oath. And so she completes the blood oath ritual in this moment. And you're probably like, what's the point? He's already dead. Like, is it just to honor his body? No. Those who are blood sworn to the king or queen of Terrasen at the time, they can be buried in the royal cemetery, basically, in the castle at Orinth. So she's basically guaranteeing that Gavriel, when he is buried, is going to be buried in the same exact place that not only his cadre, but also eventually Aedion is going to be buried. So they can all, like, be at rest in the same place. And then Aelin and Aedion go off so that they can give the cadre time alone to mourn Gavriel. And they do end up singing, like, one of the old Fae funeral dirges to him, and they have this, like, moment of mourning together as like a group. Now we jump to Elid's POV. We learn that she has been working nonstop with the healers to help any of the injured after the war has been done, and she's been healing a lot of witches. However, she does not see any of the 13. She's been looking for them, and then she's relieved when she sees Manon come through the door. But shortly after approaching Manon, Manon informs her that the 13 is dead. Obviously, Elid is devastated, but she can tell that Manon is like not here to talk about it. So Elid goes off and she goes to find Lorcan, and she finds Lorcan right outside of the room that Gavriel's been in. So him and the cadre have mourned him. They've spent time together, and he starts to leave and he runs into Elid. This is also where we learn that the whole idea of what to do to Erewhon to take him down, like involving Yrene and Dorian and Lysandra and like that whole scheming of events and having Dorian pretend to be Yrene and all that. Well, all that was Elid's idea, okay? So Lorcan is praising her for that, being like, you're not even going to get the credit. Like, you know, like Yrene's going to get the credit for killing Erewhon. And she's like, I don't need the credit, you know? But Lorcan in this moment tells her, ask me to stay. And so she's like, okay, I want you to stay. Because remember, that was Aelin's thing. She's like, after you help us win the war, it will be Elid's decision whether or not you stay. So he's asking her. He's like, ask me to stay. She's like, okay, fine, you can stay. And then he says, ask me to go to Parenth with you, because she needs to go back to Parenth. She's the Lady of Parenth. She needs to rebuild. And so she asks him to come to Parenth with her, and he agrees. And then he says, ask me to marry you. Elid began crying even as she laughed. Will you marry me, Lorcan Salvater? He swept her up into his arms, raining kisses over her face, as if some final chained part of him had been freed. I'll think about it. It's really sweet and tender, and of course Elid starts losing it in this moment. And you're like, what's so funny? She just got proposed to. Or she just proposed and he accepted. But he's like, what's so funny? And she's like, well, Lady Locan, Lady of Parenth, I have to keep my last name. And you actually would have to take my last name. Therefore, making his name Lord Lorcan Locan, I will marry you, Elid Locan, and proudly call myself Lord Lorcan Lorcan. Wow, try saying that 5 times fast. And proudly call myself Lord Lorcan Locan, even when the whole kingdom laughs to hear it. So stinking cute. And then Lorcan tells Elid that he plans to give up his immortality so that they can grow old together. So romantic. I'm obsessed. I absolutely love it. However, I think it is worth mentioning now at this point that we, to this day, are still not sure whether or not Aedion is going to settle. That's something that came up in Airfire. We're not sure whether or not Aedion is going to settle. Lysandra is a shapeshifter. She doesn't have, like, a long immortal lifespan. So whether or not Aedion and Lysandra are going to have the same lifespan, we're not really sure. Also, like I said earlier, this would be important. Dorian just confirmed that he is human. Manon is a witch. Manon is going to live for centuries. Dorian might live till he's 80. So that hurts a little bit. So yeah, those two couples, well, for Aedion and Lysandra, we're not sure, but for Manon and Dorian, they don't have the same. So Manon's gonna have to watch Dorian grow old. That's so painful. Chapter 118, this is in Yrene's POV. We learn that it's been 2 full days and she has been nonstop healing. Hafiza, however, the healer on high, thankfully has stepped in and is forcing her to go find her husband and rest. She's like, you need to sleep. If not for you, at least for your baby. So Yrene's like, okay, fine. But before she goes, Hafiza informs her that the healers are all going to be going back to the southern continent very soon to the tour. And Yrene is like, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be coming with you. Like, my husband is here. I'm having a baby. I want to start a life here. And Hafiza is like, totally understand. Yrene, however, is like, but I know, like, that means you're going to have to find a new heir, healer on high. However, how would you feel about me opening up a tour of the North. There's so many people here who have healing magic, but were never taught how to use it because of the anti-magic triangle and because magic was banned. And Hafiza gives her blessing basically for Yrene to start the tour of the North. So we're gonna get a second Tour Sesame. We then get Manon's POV as Glennis informs her that it is time for them all to go to the Wastes. And Manon's confused at first because there's still a curse on the Wastes. Like, they still need to figure out how to break the curse. But Glennis says that there were some Crocians that heard her call to aid for Terrasen and came, but they missed the war because they came from further away places. But they had to fly over the Wastes to get here. And they brought back these beautiful purple flowers. Now, this is crazy because there's supposed to be no life in the old witch kingdoms of the Wastes, but these purple flowers are growing. So let's review Rhiannon's curse for the witch kingdoms, okay? Only together can it be undone. Be the bridge, be the light. Manon became the bridge. She's the bridge between the Iron Teeth and the Crocians. Also, when iron melts is a very big part of that prophecy. The sacrifice of the 13 was fulfilling that prophecy. When flowers spring from fields of blood, remember we talked about how all these flowers were blooming after the 13th sacrifice. And then let the land be witness. Obviously, because of all of Aylin's allies and all the people that she called, literally people from all over all the lands were there and witnessed the sacrifice. Smiling through her tears, laughing in joy and sorrow, Manon laid that precious flower from the waste upon the ground, in thanks and in love, so they would know, so Asterin would know, in the realm where she and her hunter and child walked hand in hand, that they had made it, that they were going home. So Manon and the 13 broke the curse, and the waste is now officially open for all of the witches to go home. We jump to Aylin's POV as she and her court all gather together for the first time since the war has ended, and Ren is there as well. He's basically been adopted into this court. They start talking of all of the change that they're going to make and all these exciting things. Biggest notable change is Aylin wants to introduce voting as a common practice among the people of Terrasen, kind of like how she was voted to sacrifice herself. So that didn't turn her off from the voting concept entirely, which is great. We love that she wants to give the people of Terrasen a voice because they have been voiceless for so long. Then they start talking about rebuilding, and Rowan mentions that they're going to rebuild a library and a theater to rival the one in Rifthold, bigger and more grander than the one that was there that Aylin had loved. And Aylin reminds Rowan, like, although those two things would be really, really nice, they don't really have any money to do those things anymore. They've pretty much spent all of their money fighting this war. However, Rowan reminds her that with the death of Maeve, half of Doranel goes to the Whitethorns, okay? His cousin is literally one of the queens. And then the other half of that fortune is gonna go to Aylin. And Maeve did nothing if not build up some major wealth for herself in Doranel. So Rowan says, as a mating present to Aylin, he is going to give her a library and a theater to rival the one in Rifthold. So it's very sweet, very cute, and it just, it's like the best thing that Aylin could hear because that's what she loves. She hasn't really been able to focus on just, the things that she loves recently. So this is a nice way for this place to feel more like a home to her and more like a, like a civilization too, is like culture, right? We flash forward later to a moment where Aylin is thanking all of her allies for showing up, for Rolf, Galen, Ansel, and Ilias of the Silent Assassins for coming to help during the war, and staying when it seemed like she wasn't coming. And then she goes and finds Manon and thanks her privately, and also informs her that if Manon's cool with it, she wants to build a monument to the 13 so that Orinth never forgets that they owe so much, if not all of it, to them. Because if you think about it, that was over a week, almost 2 weeks before Aylin got there. It was a week and a half before they got there. Orinth would not have been around by the time Aylin got there if it were not for the 13 sacrifice. Chapter 119, this is 10 days later, and it is officially Aylin's coronation day. This is too big of a moment to not read it directly from the book. Every step, every path she had taken had led here. The faces of her friends, her allies, blurred as she passed, to the throne that waited, to the crown Dara would place upon her head. Each of her footfalls seemed to echo throughout the earth. Aylin let some of her embers stream by, bobbing in the wake of her gown's train as it flowed behind her. Her hands shook, yet she clutched the bouquet of evergreen tighter, evergreen for the eternal sovereignty of Terrasen. Each step towards the throne loomed and yet beckoned. Rowan stood at the right of the throne, teeth bared in a fierce grin that even his training could not contain. And there was Aedion at the throne's left, head high and tears running down his face, the sword of Orinth hanging at his side. It was for him that she then smiled, for the children they had been, for what they had lost, what they now gained. I'm so not well. Aelin passed Dorian and Chaol and threw a nod their way, winked at Ansel of Briarcliff, dabbing her eyes on her jacket sleeve, and then Aelin was at the 3 steps of the dais, and Dara strode to their edge, as he had instructed her last night, as she had practiced over and over in a dusty stairwell for hours. Aelin ascended the 3 steps and knelt upon the throne, the only time in her reign that she would ever bow, the only thing she would ever kneel before. Her crown, her throne, her kingdom. So, Aelin then takes her vows in the language of the old Fae and is crowned. But before the ceremony ends, she in front of everyone turns to Aedion, and in this moment, in front of the world, like he asked in Queen of Shadows, she offers him the blood oath. And so sure enough, in front of everyone, they perform the blood oath. And then, shortly after Aedion completes the blood oath, the little folk enter the throne room, come down the aisle, and present her the crown of Mab. So Aelin then places the crown of Mab on her head as well, right behind the crown of Terrasen. And then, finally, Aelin sat upon her throne. It weighed on her, nestled against her bones, that new burden. No longer an assassin, no longer a rogue princess. And when Aelin lifted her head to survey the cheering crowd, when she smiled, Queen of Terrasen and the Fairy Queen of the West, she burned bright as a star. And then she, along with, obviously, Dorian and Chaol and Nesrin and the cadre and Sartok and all of her allies, all together, they walk the streets of Orinth in a celebratory parade to welcome the better world that they have all fought for throughout this entire series. Chapter 120, we get Nesrin's POV as it's time for her and Sartok to go. So she says goodbye to Dorian, and Dorian accepts that he's going to have to find yet another captain of the guard. Then we get Chaol's POV as he receives a letter from his mother, and he opens it with Yrene, basically saying she knows what his father did. She is sorry that she believed that Chaol wouldn't write her, and that he never got her letters and spent all these years thinking she hates him, and basically says if you'll have me, I'd love to come to Adarlan, and also your little brother Taryn could join me, and we can, make up for lost time and get to meet your wife and be a family. And Chaol and Yrene are absolutely, this is what we want. So yay, they're gonna get their happy ending, one big happy family. Then we get Dorian's POV as he's talking to Manon, who's hopping onto Abraxos to head out. And I will say, Chaol and Yrene are there as well, and Dorian asks her to come visit him in Adarlan, and he's thinking about some jobs that she could have, diplomatically, so that she has political reasons to come. And Yrene in that moment is you guys could just get married, unite the kingdoms, and then you'll not need excuses to see each other because you'll just be husband and wife. To which Manon smirks and says, we'll see, and then takes off for the wastes. And then Dorian smiled and found himself for the first time in a while looking forward to tomorrow. Chapter 121, this is in Rowan's POV, as he knows today is going to be a hard day for Aelin, because basically all the allies who haven't left yet are now leaving today. So she says goodbye to Ansel. She says goodbye to Ilias of the Silent Assassins. She says goodbye to her cousin Galen. She says goodbye to Yrene. And then it's just Chaol and Dorian left. I will say the first time I read this book, I held it together up until this portion and then bawled like an absolute baby. She felt as if she had been crying without end for minutes now. Yet this parting, this final farewell, Aelin looked at Chaol and Dorian and sobbed, opened her arms to them, and wept as they held each other. I love you both, she whispered, and no matter what may happen, no matter how far we may be, that will never change. We will see you again, Chaol said, but even his voice was thick with tears. Together, Dorian breathed, shaking, we'll rebuild this world together. She couldn't stand it, this ache in her chest, but she made herself pull away and smile at their tear-streaked faces, a hand on her heart. Thank you for all that you have done for me. Dorian bowed his head. Those are words I'd never thought I'd hear from you. She barked a rasping laugh and gave him a shove. You're a king now. Such insults are beneath you. He grinned, wiping his face. Aelin smiled at Chaol, at his wife waiting beyond him. I wish you every happiness, she said to him, to them both. Such light shone in Chaol's bronze eyes that she had never seen before. We will see each other again, he repeated. Then he and Dorian turned towards their horses, towards the bright day beyond the castle gates, towards their kingdom to the south, shattered now, but not forever. Not forever. And I will say that part just wrecks me because if you think of it, this all started with the three of them in Endovier a year ago, okay? And this is ending, and like, did we even, like, to process that everything that happens between these three people from book one started a year ago? It's just so crazy to me. I love it. It's beautiful. This friendship means so much to me. Anyways, so Kaelin, Dorian, and Yrene go off, and then it's just Aelin and Rowan. So they head to their royal chambers, and he promises her that he'll bring her all of the sweets and all the cakes and all the chocolates, and she can finally, for the first time in a stinking year, rest in her bed. And honestly, after 2 years of never resting, because I'm including the year before this last crazy year that she had in the slave camp, and then even the time before that she spent hiding her identity for years and being an assassin, like, she can finally rest as herself in her kingdom, in her home. And they agree that, you know, we may have a lot to do, we may have a lot to tackle, but we will start rebuilding our new world together tomorrow, to whatever end. Now, that alone is a beautiful ending. However, we do get an epilogue because Sarah J. Maas loves us. We're getting Aelin's POV months after the fact, okay? So this is months later. And rebuilding is going very well in Terrasen. Rowan has been very hands-on helping. He's not really into, like, the political sides of things. He likes to work with his hands. So he's been helping rebuild the city. And we also learned that not long ago, we celebrated Lady Elide Locan's wedding. Her marriage specifically to Lord Lorcan Locan. Shortly after that, they went off to Paris. And then in the next couple days, we're going to be celebrating with Lysandra and Aedian's wedding, okay? So whether or not Aedian settles doesn't matter. You know, maybe in my thoughts, hopes, and dreams, even if he does settle, maybe he'll give up his immortality, kind of like how Lorcan did for Elite, you know? So maybe there's nothing to worry about there. And honestly, life is just beautiful. Mind you, there's still a lot of pain. We're still healing from a lot of loss. We are still very much recovering, but time is healing a lot of these wounds. They really are seeing the potential of this better world that they've been fighting for, and it's finally coming to life, right? And then on this morning in particular, Aelin rolls out of bed and she goes out onto her balcony to look out at Terrasen in a moment of gratitude, thinking about how far they've come and how far they still have to go, when Aelin sees something that brings her to tears. Across every mountain, spread beneath the green canopy of Oakwald, carpeting the entire plain of Theralis, the King's Flame was blooming. That is the flower that blooms on Terrasen whenever there is a blessing that whoever is on the throne is like a true righteous king or queen. And Orlan was a great king, and there was just one King's Flame that bloomed. Covering the entirety of the plain, there is King's Flame blooming everywhere for Aelin. Basically confirming, in case you were doubting it, which I doubt you were, that Aelin is the rightful queen of Terrasen, and it is going to thrive under her. That is all the confirmation we need that everything that happens after this epilogue is most likely very beautiful, and I hate that we will never get a book. I guess never say never, but I would like to believe one day that there's going to be a book of what Terrasen looks like 10 years or 15 years after the fact, but we can rest easy knowing at least the King's Flame has bloomed for Aelin, indicating that it's going to be quite a lovely rule for her. That is the end. Oh my goodness, that is the end of Kingdom of Ash, the entire plot. And in doing so, that is the end of the entire plot of the Throne of Glass series. This has been 1.5 years in the making. I have a lot of thoughts, feelings, and emotions about it. I'm really happy to be done with it, but at the same time, I'm really gonna miss it. This has been a huge part of my life, obviously, in the last couple of years. But like I promised, I am going to be kicking things off with A Court of Thorns and Roses starting next week. So now that you know everything that happens in Throne of Glass, I would encourage you to check out my playlist, Guide to the Maasverse. I have a lot of fun Throne of Glass videos in here that are totally full of spoilers, but now that you have learned the entire plot of Throne of Glass and you know the entire plot, there's no spoilers in there for you. And then of course you should subscribe so you get notified whenever I post episode 1 of the entire plot of A Court of Thorns and Roses.